It's the cold hard truth. Everyone really want to know what's going on with her show. Just get on the air and you will know it's Sandra. The queen of the mile road is here, helping people from everywhere. Get on the phone and you will hear Sandra. Now she will tell you how it goes, but don't you ever step on her toes, 'cause you will hear the cold hard truth from Sandra. They say she's the hero in town, helping people from all around. You get a call, your money is found, it's Sandra. Some will call her late at night just to say that there is a fight, and she will not just leave it alone. She'll get up and call on the phone, and when politics starts on her show, everyone really wants to know the way the things will really go with Sandra. And some will start to criticize, get on the show and tell pure lies, but someday we'll realize it's Sandra. And when they start to argue again, she'll pull the heads to the wind, and soon you will be a friend of Sandra. 'Cause every day everyone wanna hear from Sandra. 'Cause every day everyone wanna hear from Sandra. 'Cause every day everyone got to hear from Sandra. 'Cause every day everyone got to hear from Sandra.
Alrighty there, folks. Good morning. Good morning. I saw Dr. Rob tapping his feet and bobbing his head to that country theme song. Big shout out to a local artist who created this music for us. Oops. Not sure what happened there. My apologies. I was just saying that Mr. Berman Scott is the artist of that song, the writer, I should say. Yep. And he sung it as well. So lots of amazing talent there from Cayman Brac. Yep. And he spends quite a bit of his time now in Cayman Brac as well. So we wanted to have a discussion on what's happening in Venezuela. I did promise you guys that we would have kind of a deep dive conversation about the situation there. Very, very close to us geographically. Sometimes we feel like we're miles apart in the region, but it's really not that far. So we want to pay close attention to what's happening, not just in our four corners of our little small islands here, but also on the international front, folks. It's very important that we are aware, because there are consequences that could potentially impact all of us. We have a lot of people here from Trinidad, not so much Venezuela, but we do have a lot of people who reside in the Cayman Islands from Trinidad And, lots of business interests are shared between the two as well. So we've got some wonderful guests lined up for you here today. And I'm really happy to have secured these two gentlemen who are going to be joining us. So first up, we have Dr. Rob Burrell. He is a senior research fellow with the Global and National Security Institute at the University of Florida, specializing in resilience, resistance, and interstate conflict from nonviolent protests through full-scale belligerency. So he's a retired Marine with multiple combat tours, and he previously taught irregular warfare. I mean, his history is so amazing. Both of these gentlemen are amazing, but wow. At the Joint Special Operations University, and also taught at the Navy and Marine Corps history at the U.S. Naval Academy. So let's go ahead and have Dr. Rob jump on with us. Good morning, Dr. Rob. How are you?
Hi, Sandy. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, and I can see you beautifully as well.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very pleased to have you here. And not to be outdone, we've got Dr. Homer Harkins, who's also joining us this morning. And Dr. Homer, we'll call him Hawk, Dr. Hawk. He's a military strategist and security professional whose work centers around or on applying classic and modern military theory to today's operational and geopolitical challenges, including contemporary conflicts and emerging domains like cyber and advanced missile warfare. Another interesting expertise here. And through his writing and public commentary, he draws on thinkers, from historical thinkers, I should just say, and applies their scenarios to current scenarios, my apologies, for practitioners and policymakers. And he's collaborated with Dr. Burrell in providing analysis of U.S. activities directed at the Venezuelan dictatorship and the broader Caribbean security dynamics. So let's put your virtual hands together for Dr. Homer Hawk Harkins as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think everybody can hear you.
Good afternoon, because I'm in the United Arab Emirates. So for me, it's good afternoon. So
it's good afternoon. Yeah. Wonderful. So listen, first of all, thank you both for coming on the program. I'm sure, had you heard of the Cayman Islands before?
Of course. Yes.
Yes, of course.
Yes, you might have been a little bit taken aback to receive an invite from someone in the Cayman Islands to come on the program. But, we like to cover both regional and international topics here. As I say to our virtual listeners, they're students in a classroom. And so for us to, be really good students and get the best possible grades and understand what's happening in the world, we need to call on experts. I might have an opinion about what's happening in Venezuela, but I'm far from an expert. So I'm so glad that we've been able to secure both of you coming on the program today. So let's start, right away. I think it's probably a good idea if maybe we take a step back and we get sort of a baseline before we go any further into this deep analysis. What happened over the weekend? I mean, this has been a buildup, to be sure. And then we had a operation that happened over the weekend. So can we get a little bit of a synopsis on what transpired between the U.S. and Venezuela? Obviously, the United States President Donald Trump has been saying for quite some time that he had his eyes on Venezuela. And I think some of us definitely saw it coming. Not sure we anticipated it so early in the year, but who wants to give us a little breakdown on what transpired?
Homer, you want to take it?
I will just say that, of course, there was obviously a spectacularly successful special operations raid into Caracas, specifically Fuerte Tiuna, which is the principal military installation for the Venezuelan military in the center of Caracas. I actually spent 3 years working on Fuerte Tiuna. And it was successful really beyond anything I imagined. I was one of many who thought we weren't going to do that, and that was just too much risk. But to my surprise, we did, and you have to give credit to the soldiers and officers and the service members who pulled off that spectacularly successful raid. and the illegitimate fellow running Venezuela is now sitting in a jail cell in New York, and will, in all probability, spend the rest of his natural life in that jail cell. And we could go into details. I'm not sure if your audience really is overly concerned about all the techniques and such, but there's plenty of available open source information on how it was conducted.
Let's go into it a little bit.
Okay.
I'm curious myself on how they did it in terms of, did they have inside help? I think that's probably an obvious question or an obvious answer, but did they actually have people in Venezuela who would have been providing them with intelligence and perhaps even assisting them with the mission?
Let me tackle that.
Yes.
I just want to mention that both Homer and I have clearances, and so we can't give you really specific details specifically because we worked in the special operations space.
Right.
But that is a big question. What there wasn't, if you look at the casualty count, there was more Cubans killed than there was Venezuelans. And so, that's a question of, well, did they know it was coming? Did they put up a fight? But the second night, the night afterwards, I guess this was last night, they did respond kind of clumsily to what they thought was another raid. So that makes me think that the Venezuelan security forces are reacting. They're trying to react, but they're not very good. I think that would be my assessment. But what do you think, Hawk?
Well, I if there is a source, then no one should know who that source is, obviously. And it's interesting. It's kind of James Bondish, but in a way, it really doesn't matter from the greater geopolitical perspective. I do think that they hit a series of targets. From what I saw, they took out what was, when I was there, called the Comando Central de las Fuerzas Armadas, and it was that's the big operations center of the military in Caracas. And I suspect that any unfortunate Venezuelan service member who was on duty that night is no longer with us. But that and a series of targets, I think, blinded and crippled the Venezuelan response. There is some open source discussion of the possibility of new cyber warfare activity and such. I don't know, but discussion that the lights in specific arenas where people were going in were turned off. So I suspect the ability to command and control any response was robbed immediately from the Venezuelans. And it was, from that point, we had a tactical initiative and surprise, and we went in, got out, mission accomplished. So
the other thing to mention, Sandy, is they did do a mock-up. I don't know how long that they practiced on it, but particularly the unit that went in had practiced in a facility that was a mock-up of the buildings that they were going into, and so that what you need in these situations is muscle memory, right? Every bad decision I ever made in combat was because I didn't have muscle memory to outthink what I was going to do next, right? You don't want to be thinking. You need to be reacting in a way that you're accustomed to, and so they did that for some time period. Administration didn't mention the exact time frame, but that really helped folks who were going into a place they've never been before. They've never been to Caracas, so it was such an impressive special operation. I would say, as a historian that looks at these things, it's probably the greatest special operation that's ever been conducted.
Very, very interesting. All right. Well, just to remind our listeners, of course, if they have a question, they can put their questions in the chat. I see quite a few people already logging on to the show. No doubt more will be joining us here shortly as well. So it's interesting that you say that basically it was a pretty clean, if we can use that term, operation, and that they went in and they got out quickly. Does this mean now that there are no Americans on the ground military presence in Venezuela?
I would say again, I don't think there's any official military presence. I actually spent 5 years serving in Venezuela on 2 tours as a young major with the Special Forces, as an exchange officer for 3 years out the countryside, and then 2 years as a security assistance, basically liaison to the Venezuelan army. And there was a time when we had sizable presence, but all of that had basically evaporated.
Right.
There might be some diplomatic presence, but I don't think there's anything official or kind of announced. So,
Okay.
Was anything clandestine or covert done? We know that several weeks ago, the president mentioned covert activities would be going on, but I don't know. Obviously, there was some wonderful intelligence, which Secretary of State Rubio and the president talked about. So a lot of work was done. Now, was there specifically presence on the ground? I don't know. Usually when you do those kind of things, you work through sources. You don't have your guys being James Bond sneaking around the city. You work with modern technology, so you don't really need to have your people on the ground. So,
So Abby has a little opinion here. She says they literally recreated the room he was in for training. Of course, they had insider information. So Abby's given some feedback there. Makes good logical sense.
Now, I will say that again, I was on Fortuna for 2 years, and I tried with some of the visuals that we have to locate this facility, and I have to say it's new. This facility, this underground bunker thing that Maduro was in, was relatively new. So it was not there when I was there, and I left in 2002. So it's been a while, but so yeah, but maybe you get plans. It's a little easier to get plans than it is to there. You can actually maybe a little bit of money, a little bit of incentive. You can get the plans for the building and create your mock-up. So.
So we do have some questions that are coming in, and we'll get to some of those here in just a second. We also are going to talk about sort of the international response, because statements have been issued across the globe from the United Nations, the European Union, and other global actors, including even CARICOM regionally, about how they felt about this. What is the general sense? Is there a general sense of that President Trump did the right thing for the right reasons? Or on the global scene, or is this, are the majority kind of feeling like, nobody was a fan of Maduro. He was probably an absolutely horrible dictator, but this wasn't the way to do it. What's your general sense if you had to choose, gentlemen, between those two options, and then we'll get into some details? What's the response from international leaders around the world, organizations such as United Nations and others?
Well, I've been paying close attention to the metrics on this because I'm very interested myself.
Yes.
Really more so because I think the U.S. has a lot of goodwill and normally has a lot of friends, but with the current administration and some of the remarks he's made, I thought maybe there'd be some folks, particularly Latin America, that might, feel differently. But the Organization of American States, they met yesterday, and really Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil stood out as the ones that opposed it. And nearly every other state had open support for getting rid of Maduro. So I was really surprised by that, and I think that's good going forward. There. In the UN, there was a Security Council meeting 2 days ago, and any UN member could come speak, and some did, but the ones who came to give criticism weren't really legitimate criticism, right? You had Cuba, who spoke twice, by the way. Cuba couldn't get enough in the first 5 minutes, so they came up at the end and they spoke again. You have actors who have horrible human rights violations in their own countries, no democracy, and they're complaining about international law, which was like the biggest hypocrisy, right? So those are kind of given folks who would use the UN as a forum. The ones that you'd think, well, you don't want to see folks kind of switching sides against the U.S. There was Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia again who did have complaints about the use of military force in Latin America. But the other ones are mostly the BRICS country, the Brazil, China, Russia, South Africa kind of coalition. But no, like European NATO countries or other folks that kind of switched sides to say this is, despite this, you get a lot of stuff in the news that's saying that our European allies are protesting this, but not officially. I didn't see that.
I did see one from a few from the UK that were not particularly positive. So we're going to play a video statement in the aftermath from the Prime Minister there in the UK just here in a second. But good morning to Ms. Beulah. Good morning to all of our good folks that are listening to the program. Aisle 2025 has a question, says, have they released any footage of the captures yet? Have we seen much? I think we've seen mostly footage that was probably taken from civilians from buildings nearby where they were shocked at the attack and were kind of recording it. But have we seen anything official come out from the U.S. government? Nothing.
I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any, fancy videos from the actual takedown. There might be some of that, but I haven't seen anything. Rob, have you come up with anything yet?
No. In fact, even the montage that Trump put on his website, it was all stuff from the ground from Venezuelans. It wasn't any U.S. footage.
Yeah, that's all I've seen as well.
There were rumors today. There were rumors that there were actually some Cuban military personnel who were caught and extracted. There's rumors, but I think there is some attempt to criticize the aggressiveness of it, the violation of sovereignty and such. But it seems that most of the narrative is more along the lines of it was an unfortunate thing that we're glad it happened. However, we need to think of what's coming next. What's next for Venezuela? And of course, that's a legitimate question, is what's the plan? What's the follow through? And that's probably where the regional commentator should be, is give us an idea of what your plan is, what your intentions are, and not so much whether or not it was a good or bad thing. Maduro had very, very little support internationally. There are a lot of diplomatic effort have been put together to discredit his continued presence in the office of the presidency. So it's hard to argue that he should have been left in power. That's kind of a hard argument for anyone to make, other than possibly Cuba, Nicaragua, and Iran. So
right. All right, we got a few video clips here for you, things that have been trending on social media. And obviously, we were monitoring, especially on Saturday and Sunday over the weekend, the international response and what officially was being said. And there were a number of nations who were questioning the legality of it. As you say, there's a question of international law here. So let's just have a look at a few of those.
Be really clear with you that there was no UK involvement in this operation. And obviously we're working in relation to British citizens and nationals who are there with our embassy. But we need to establish a full picture. I then need to speak to President Trump. I need to speak to our allies. But I don't shy away from this. I've been a lifelong advocate of international law and the importance of compliance with international law. But I want to ensure that I've got all the facts at my disposal. And we haven't got that at the moment. And we need to get that before we come to a decision about the consequences in relation to the actions that have been taken.
All right. So there's Prime Minister from the UK, a very, very tempered response, but at the same time calling for more information, but also saying that, you know, we have to respect international law. You almost get a sense that he was saying that maybe there's some concerns about the violation of international law. Now, here's another snippet that we have from another news agency that was kind of monitoring the response on the international front as well.
Inside Venezuela, a mix of celebration and fear over the country's future. Many expressing relief Maduro is gone, others condemning the operation. ABC's chief international correspondent James Longman is at the border with Venezuela.
Tonight, the world reacting to America's stunning operation in Venezuela. A number of people were killed in the US strikes that accompanied Maduro's capture. This apartment building right next to a military complex, although the government won't confirm the number of dead. The defense minister still defiant, saying today it was against Venezuela, tomorrow it could be against any state or any country. But after the celebration in the streets at the fall of an autocrat, millions wonder, what now?
This is Cúcuta on the Colombian side of the border, and that there is Venezuela. And in normal times, tens of thousands of Venezuelans cross this border to buy goods here that they can't get back home. Now, though, it's a path perhaps to a new future for the millions of people who've been forced into exile.
We meet nervous faces, like Jose Luis and his mother.
You get the sense that people don't really know how to feel. Happy that Maduro is gone, but they have no idea what's going to happen next.
We meet Sol.
What did you?
When I heard the news about Maduro, I started crying with joy, she says. I have family in exile. Maybe they can come home. She shows us her groceries, cheaper here than in Venezuela.
Sol is hoping that in the future, she won't have to come to Colombia to get her shopping. And it's a busy night tonight, Lindsay, on the bridge to Venezuela. Happiness, the overwhelming emotion we encountered about the end of Maduro, but for many of Venezuela's neighbors, they are still officially condemning the operation. Big questions about what will happen next. Lindsay?
Lots of mixed emotions there, James. Thank you.
Let's do one more from the British Parliament. Obviously, we are British overseas territory, so we do pay close attention to what the United Kingdom is saying about these things. And I did get your link there, Dr. Rob, so just having a quick look at that as well.
If the United States can conduct an operation in Venezuela to capture Nicolas Maduro, an elected president, and put him on trial in American courts, then why is it impossible to capture Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel and bring him before international court?
All right. So there's a brief snippet of at least one MP who, had a opinion there that he was sharing. So, Dr. Rob, you shared with me published yesterday a statement from the United Kingdom. This is a speech basically saying that they want to have a safe and peaceful transition to a legitimate government that actually reflects the will of the Venezuelan people. Now, this is a big question mark because I think that that is, in fact, one of the larger concerns, whether or not this military action will actually achieve any real long-term reprieve for the people of Venezuela, if life is going to actually get any better for them. Or are we just swapping out one dictator for probably another one that's at this time, sometimes wearing a skirt? Those are some real concerns. But in the interim, we see a lot of commentary around the international law aspect. Do you think that this is a serious question about whether or not the United States might have run afoul of any international law?
If I could respond to that last clip that you had in Parliament.
Oh, yes.
You see, Trump's already a lightning rod, but this military action is getting a lot of domestic play, right? And so you have the opposition in Parliament stating that President Maduro, a duly elected, that's complete nonsense. He wasn't duly elected. He's not the president of Venezuela, right? So there's a lot of shenanigans, I think, going on, which have nothing to do with Venezuela. It just has to do with influencing domestic politics. Yeah. Anyway, so your question about the future of Venezuela is a great one. Homer probably has a better feel for it for the Venezuelan people. But
Yes.
there's 9 million Venezuelans who miss home. That have been forced out of that country, and the resistance leader Maria Corina Machado has voiced many times that she wanted to bring all the children back to Venezuela. There's a lot of mothers and grandmothers and folks who want to see their families, and they're hoping that this transition can get to that. It's not going to, the way that this has been designed, this is not going to be a quick transition to democracy, I think. And I'm very hopeful that it will turn that way. But the Chavista regime is certainly going back to what they know. That's trying to maintain control. That's probably just a natural going back to muscle memory. That's kind of what they do, right? So they're trying to swing wagons and get control again. But there is some reporting that the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, whose brother just took over the house there, by the way, so that's a good family tie for her, a good strike for her, is willing to play ball with the U.S. Demands. So Politico reported on the 5th what the U.S. demands were. I don't know how accurate Politico is, but they sound right. Curtail drug flows to the United States, remove Iranian, Cuban, and adversarial operatives from the country, stop oil sale to U.S. adversaries, and prepare for eventual free elections. So if those things happen, I think a transition could happen.
All right. Let's. I have a question for you, Dr. Homer. Now, you actually lived. Let me just understand. You lived in Venezuela. How long were you? 5 years. So 5 years. Okay. Yeah. So you're fluent in Spanish, I'm assuming, and you had a good.
I have what you call general proficiency in Spanish. I'm married to a Venezuelan, so yes, and there were 5 wonderful years. It's a beautiful country. They're an amazing, friendly, open people, and I, like a lot of people who know Venezuela, have kind of suffered and watched in dismay as a wonderful country has fallen to absolute failure. Levels of crime and dysfunction are just unimaginable. And so there's always, I've gotten, like many Venezuelan, my wife's Venezuelan, we've almost lost hope that it could possibly turn around. And then suddenly there's a spark of hope. So maybe it's going to be tough. Rob is an expert on this kind of thing. But when you want to transition from an authoritarian regime to a democratic regime, you have to rely on existing structure, existing bureaucracy, existing actors. You've got to hope that just enough of them are willing to say, okay, let's give it a chance to actually make it happen, to actually have elections and bring in a new government. And I think that's the hope. That's the hope that we could actually pull this off. And I'll be positive and say I think we can. But it's going to be a long, hard road.
All right. We do have some questions that are coming in from some of our listeners. So we're definitely going to give those priority. And of course, the phone lines are also open. Let me remind you, 936-2626 is the local telephone number. When we talk about this concept of, and this, of course, gets intertwined with American politics, what people probably feel and think about President Trump as a whole. But when we talk about the United States feeling like they are the world police when they choose to be. So even that last clip about what's happening in, with Netanyahu in that part of the region, there is a sense that the Americans, favor who they wish to favor, and they ignore a lot of dictators when they feel like ignoring them. And it's normally because of their interests. So not a single one of us, and I don't know about the two of you, but we certainly don't believe that this was about drugs ever. We've been saying this for as long as Trump has been fixated on Venezuela. I think most of the world has accepted that this has really 1%, maybe, but this really has nothing to do with drugs. This is about Venezuelan oil and maybe some additional elements of regional control within Latin America, who, historically, a lot of them have not necessarily been pro-American. You've seen, for example, Russia involved heavily in some of these countries. We have seen China willing to build bridges, literally, and all sorts of infrastructure to gain favor with some of the regional countries in that basin, if you will. So that sort of taints, I think, what people feel even about this operation and the bigger operation of democracy, right? And where we go from here. In the Cayman Islands, we don't have a large Venezuelan population, but we do have a fairly healthy Cuban population, for example. And so we've seen the president talk about, and this is one point that I think maybe is worth addressing. The fact that President Trump is a little bit, I don't know what the right word is to describe his personality, but he's a little bit here, there, and everywhere. Like he's all over the place at the same time, right? If this was really focused on, all right, we've got this action in Venezuela, we have a very defined and narrow, plan of what we intend to do. Even in the aftermath of this, we feel like there's no plan. And I'm going to get to that, so let's stick a pin there. But he is talking about Cuba. He's talking about Greenland. He's talking about, he wants to take over everyone. Like, we're not going to be surprised if he drops the Cayman Islands because maybe he wants our banking system. If our name comes up next, we're just like, what the heck? He's like, I don't want to use a mental term loosely, but he's almost like schizo in that he's all over the place. And it's hard to follow and understand that there's any real firm policy that makes sense here. Do you guys get that sense, or is that just me?
I'm in the same boat. I think part of I don't think people in his staff know where he's going to go next. He's just looking at the shiny ball, and then he's going over here with another shiny ball. And his talking points about, hey, we want Venezuela's oil. It feeds the leftist narrative in Latin America, which has they have revolution in their blood. Latin Americans have.
I mean, you could say that about the Americans too.
They have this you say you're going to take the oil and you're going to run the state. You would think it would really reinforce some anti-imperialist sentiment. But I would say that from a national security standpoint, the things that Trump's not saying that I think Marco Rubio is much more attentive to is that the problems in Venezuela are not country specific. They're regional problems. You have the FARC, you have ELN, you have narco terrorist organizations or transnational criminal organizations. None of those are specific to Venezuela. So to make the whole region more stable, I think getting rid of this dictatorship, which was it was in bed or allowed or facilitated those activities from Venezuela, will make the whole region safer. But these just are not the topic points of Trump, because he's trying to energize his base, and his base in the United States cares about the U.S. They don't really care about Venezuela. They don't care about the transnational problems as much. They don't want to invest a lot of U.S. time, energy, and effort on that. But Homer might have a different perspective.
Well, I think that Trump is the consummate showman. And he always goes for the spectacular. From the moment he came down the Escalade back in 2016 and just made some extremely inflammatory comments about people coming into the country, he has been doing that. He's been throwing out these sensational things like a good showman, and it has worked for him. And but behind the craziness, I do believe there's a man who is, when I hear people talk about how he's just not very smart, or he doesn't know what he's doing, and then I've got to think of a man who's got, something like 500 corporations. He took millions and turned it into billions. He not only made it in business, he made it in entertainment, and then he got elected president of the United States twice.
Well,
this is not an idiot, right? So behind all the craziness, I think there is a rationality, and he just published his national security strategy, and if you want to know what he thinks, read it. It's actually pretty well written. It's an incredibly realistic strategy. You may know that international relations is kind of three schools of thought: the realist school, the liberalist school, and the constructivist. And the realist is just about pursuing your interests. And the constructivist is about ideas, about promoting your identity as a people and culture, and then you have the liberalists who are about things like international law and the United Nations. It is the least liberalist strategy in my lifetime. I just looked at it yesterday. It mentions democracy 3 times. All 3 are criticizing Europe for threatening democracy on things like free speech and preventing parties that are populist from running. It does not mention human rights at all. The human rights is not there. So it is a very realistic strategy. And I think that as Rob said, there really are, some priorities here. One is getting foreign influence out of the hemisphere. I don't think Trump is so much concerned about business as far as China goes, but as far as political influence, he wants the adversaries out. He wants Iran out. He wants China out. He wants Russia out. He wants Cuba finally once and for all knocked out. So you can see this as part of that plan. And as far as drugs, I think Trump, his brother died of alcoholism. And he sincerely, when he says, 60,000 Americans die of drug overdoses every year from drugs imported to the United States, I want to change that. He wants to change that. And that's one of the aspects of Venezuela is, the cancer of narcotics infects a lot of governments, a lot of establishments in the region. I mean, even with the steroids in Venezuela, I went and checked. There was about a 4-year period where more money was coming into Venezuela from drugs than oil. So it was a true narco state. Colombia is not a narco state. Mexico is not a narco state. Venezuela was a narco state, and he wants to end that. So I do think that is oil part of it? Of course. Now I will tell you, I mean, there's no shortage of oil, right? America's got all the oil. We're energy independent. But I do believe that the more oil that's available and flowing, the lower the price of oil, which is good for the United States. So I just think that if you step back and you look at it from a realistic perspective, which I believe it is the most realistic national security strategy in my lifetime, then what has happened actually kind of makes a lot of sense.
Well, of course, it's a type of oil that Venezuela allegedly has, the crude oil, that is most important for the Americans versus just oil in general. So some people might want to have that. Gabby, I see, made Dr. Rob chuckle when she says he better not come to Cayman. He's not welcome here. We don't need him. Let's look at a few of the additional responses. And we do have some people on WhatsApp who are also commenting, and I'll share some of those. But of course, the Cuban government, and like I said, Cayman has fairly close ties to Cuba. We have direct flights to Cuba, I think, at least once or twice a week. And so this is an interesting response from their leadership as well.
¡Abajo el imperialismo!
And so for the benefit of our radio listeners, I'll translate a little bit of what he's saying. So this is Cuban president to Trump. He says, this is not your backyard.
¡Abajo el imperialismo! ¡Abajo el imperialismo!
And he says, down with imperialism.
¡Abajo el imperialismo!
Down with genocide,
Genocida,
immoral,
y fascista.
and fascist imperialism.
Este acto de terrorismo de Estado.
He calls it a state act of terrorism that has occurred in
De terrorismo de Estado que acaba de ocurrir en Venezuela.
Es un atropello escandaloso a las normas
He says it's a scandalous violation of international law.
del derecho internacional. La agresión militar a una nación
The military aggression against a peaceful nation
de paz que en nada amenaza a Estados
which poses no threat to the U.S.
Unidos y el secuestro de
and the kidnapping of a legitimate president,
un presidente legítimo electo
sovereignly elected by his people. And of course, Dr. Homer says that was never the case.
soberanamente por su pueblo. No puede haber silencio
There can be no silence or acceptance
ni aceptación de ese acto de terrorismo de
of this act of state terrorism,
Estado, solo comparable
comparable only to the crimes against humanity
con los crímenes contra la humanidad que comete el
committed by the Israeli Zionism
sionismo israelí en la franja de Gaza.
in the Gaza Strip. So a lot of people tying this into other conflicts around the world, which is always very, very interesting.
El muy oscuro objeto del
He says the very dark object of imperialist desire
deseo imperialista es el petróleo
is Venezuelan oil.
venezolano. Son las tierras
The lands
y los recursos naturales
and natural resources of Venezuela, which we should just say as an aside, there's other things in Venezuela other than just oil that makes Venezuela very, very interesting from that perspective.
de Venezuela. No, señores imperialistas.
No imperialists,
Este no es su patrio trasero,
this is not
ni
your
territorio en
backyard,
disputa.
nor a disputed territory.
No aceptamos ni
We do not
reconocemos la
accept
doctrina
or
Monroe,
recognize the Monroe
ni
Doctrine,
reyes ni
nor
emperadores
outdated kings or emperors
trasnochados por Venezuela
Venezuela,
y por supuesto
and of course
también por
also for
Cuba.
Cuba.
Estamos dispuestos a dar
We are
hasta
prepared,
nuestra propia sangre.
even, sorry, I think I missed something there. We are prepared, let me just back. We are prepared to give even our
hasta
own
nuestra
blood,
propia sangre, hasta nuestra propia
even
vida,
our own
que los
lives,
precios muy caros.
but we will make them pay a very
No
high
son
price.
tiempos de media tinta,
These are not time,
son
it's
tiempos de
not
media
time for half
tinta,
measures.
son tiempos
These
de
are times for
definiciones
defining our
y de
stance
tomar partido
and taking a
frente
stand
al
against
fascismo
fascism
y la barbarie
and imperial
imperial.
barbarism.
Abajo el
Down with
imperialismo.
imperialism. And
Abajo
that
el
seems to be the
imperialismo.
theme of this brief clip, down with imperialism. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, as a country who we are still an overseas territory to the United Kingdom, there are a lot of people here who have a love-hate relationship with this concept of imperialism, because we've seen historically what big nations, the US, France, have done, the UK have done, from, I guess, to all sorts of overseas territories or colonies, as they used to be called, everywhere from India to different states in Africa, the Caribbean. And we know, even as close as Jamaica, the UK and the European group pillaged Jamaica of whatever they could get. And then when they were done with it, they simply walked away. And I should correct that, because they didn't necessarily just walk away. They actually strategically did things. I'm talking about the United Kingdom now. They actually strategically did things to destroy any up and coming industries that they had. So whether it was the coffee industry, for example, that was doing really, really well in Jamaica and some of the Eastern Caribbean countries, the UK actually put policies in place that devastated those industries, so that when these countries, primarily in the 1960s, decided to go independent, their story of independence was not even an even fight, because they were, they had issues with resources, infrastructure build out, and trying to survive on their own, because their mother countries had really done such a horrible job, and almost in a vindictive nature. When they then separated from them, they continued to do things that were a detriment to the former colonies. So when we hear terms like imperialism, it strikes probably a little bit differently coming from a nation that is still an overseas territory, right? We can probably relate a little bit to the Cubans when they use that word. So there is a connectivity there. And if you talk to, I think, a lot of Cumanians, they, will say, a lot of these countries have never, for example, France forcing Haiti to pay reparations when Haiti could never demand that, or any African country could never demand that from anybody else. Like, it's just crazy the relationship that the powerful countries have had with their overseas territories or their dependent territories. So nobody likes an imperialist. And if America comes across like one on the international stage, it is from the perspective of foreign relations and what foreign nationals think of Americans and their military and political actions. It is what it is. So I think Americans have to be very, very cognizant of the role that they play, so that they'll jump in and say, oh, well, democracy is the greatest thing in the world. And we want everybody, although in fact, democratic states have been losing ground for a really long time. It is a political viewpoint that seems to not really be winning people over, right? And so there's a big question mark about, do democracies even work? We see that America, what's supposed to be the greatest democracy that exists right now, but can I say that it's literally at times a shithole? Like you have the January 6th situation. You've got constant protests in the streets of America. Your healthcare system sucks. There's like all these things that make us look at a democracy and we go, if this is what a great democracy looks like, do we actually want that? And then on top of it, we do have, I think it's interesting that you said President Trump, you see him as being very successful, because a lot of people would probably disagree with you. And so I have a comment here that made me chuckle when this person made the following. Let me just see here. They actually said, how can he be successful when he's bankrupt a very casino? They're like, who the hell bankrupts a casino? And so you talk about his failures in business. I mean, despite all of that, I agree that now the Trump family, mostly because of his political posturing and position right now, have managed to increase their wealth in this last, since his last election. But that's the amazing system, I think, about the American, I don't know, maybe that's what democracy is. I mean, it's hard to explain, but this person, I'll just read what they said. They said, good morning. Who appointed the U.S. the world police, and why they like to have the right to invade anywhere? This country is in a hot mess right now. Their country, is in a hot mess right now. They're not a self-righteous and straight arrow. How many failed businesses and bankruptcies? Who bankrupts the casino? I'm logging off now before I throw up. They, the UK, also distorted Jamaica bauxite industry. So I was talking about, the coffee industry, but they also mentioned the bauxite industry, which is another one as well. So what do you say to people who are sitting back, like the Cayman Islands and many other countries? Most of the world at some point was a colony of somebody else, even the United States of America, right? Although they have, I think, probably forgotten that. But what do you say to us when we sit here and go?
Well, the first thing I would have to say is, I understand why the head of state of Cuba is furious, because he just lost a colony, right? The colony of Cuba was Venezuela. Let's remember who is actually guarding Maduro. And as a soldier, I'm never going to rejoice in the death of 35 fellow soldiers. They were doing their duty, but they were Cubans guarding a Venezuelan president who was not legitimately in office. So, and why? Because like a good colonial master, it was profitable for Cuba, and they have lost control of that colony, and they're going to pay the price for it. So you would expect that kind of response from the head of state of Cuba. Now, I will say to you that, as I said, the national security strategy only mentions democracy 3 times, and not in the context of trying to promote and export democracy. And one could argue that what got Venezuela into the mess that it is in is democracy. I was there when Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chavez and 3 of his fellow lieutenant colonels launched a good old-fashioned military coup that left 25 young soldiers dead and another 50 in the hospital, right? And ironically, about 6 years later, the people of Venezuela voted that man into office. And then they voted into power a constitution that ended democracy in Venezuela. So, yeah, I mean, democracy, I would say, as a member of the Commonwealth, one of your great leaders, Winston Churchill, who said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the rest, right? Democracy never, it's not perfect, but I do think that in the end, as Rob was saying, and the goal is democratic elections in Venezuela. The best way to create some kind of legitimate government in Venezuela that could bring them back into the community of nations is through a democratic process. And ironically, one of the talking heads, I think that's more kind of thinking ahead, I read today, listened to, compared Nicaragua, where in 1992, a communist regime lost an election in Nicaragua. And they very wisely left power. But what happened? They were reelected. And the second time around, the geopolitics was enough where they could just stay in power. And if you know Nicaragua, you know what I'm talking about. So I would think that Delcy Rodriguez is wisely thinking, let's go ahead and give democracy a chance, right? Because we've got the infrastructure, we've got the political system we need to eventually retake power through the democratic process. So, but that's for 10 years from now. Maybe in 10 years we get a 10-year anniversary discussion to see how democracy played out round 2 in Venezuela. So
right. All right. Well, we're going to get to that here in just a second. So Sandra says, boom, he's right. That's why Cuba, China, and Russia are mad right now. Let me see. Sia says, who would you rather have control of the world's largest oil reserves? Would you rather Russia or China to control the oil? Personally, I prefer my good old USA. Okay. And Philip says, these guys have been watching too much Fox News. Did they hear Trump's speech yesterday about the oil? Did they hear Stephen Miller's speech about taking over Greenland yesterday? We're going to talk about the Greenland situation because I touched on this earlier and I said, let's stick a pin because there is a concern that, obviously President Trump feels like this has been a successful operation. So now this is giving him the bravado to say publicly that he intends to go after all these other countries. And okay, Venezuela is obviously very, very hot. Like I said, no one supported Maduro and his antics. We understand that was a dictatorship, but Greenland, are we serious? Is President Trump serious, or did he knock his head and have too much eggnog over Christmas? But we'll get to that here in a second. We've got a caller in the line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program. Oh, hold on 1 second, Denny. I can't hear you through the board. Let me try to see if we can get a reconnection there. Let's see. Is that better? Hello?
Hi.
Hi. There you go.
Morning.
Morning.
It seems to me that Caymanians like dictators. They seem to be taking up for them.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed by the UK Prime Minister. I mean, in their role of imperialism, this current Prime Minister is he's trying to make it seem as if somehow getting rid of a dictator like Maduro might be questionable. And this is one of the things that infuriates me about the blatant hypocrisy of British politicians. Right? You see what happens over time is that type of nonsense leads to inaction, which leads to a worse situation until things become explosive. And one of your, I think you read a message earlier asking who allowed the U.S. to be the world's policeman or something to that effect. When 3 great whites were swimming in the ocean, who's the referee?
I guess whoever's the biggest. I don't know.
Okay. And so how do you go to Venezuela and ask the person who's occupying the president, the office of president, to, comply and submit himself to being indicted by a court of law for crimes? How do you do that? How do you ask the the people who are the problem to solve the problem if they're unwilling. And if you are the United States and you're unwilling to tolerate a neighbor doing certain things in your country, do you just sit there? I mean, to me, that's what the UK Prime Minister would do. He would do nothing. But I think that's foolish, because you're asking the question of was like, well, is the American example what democracy is about? But purely speaking, democracy is just whatever the majority wants. But that isn't all that America is, because it's not just about what the majority wants. The minority also have rights. Okay? And let's think about the freedom of expression. In America, you can say things, and you know that saying things includes doing things, like January 6th. We're upset with things, and they can express themselves about what the American government is doing in ways that, well, perhaps even the Democrats at the time didn't like. But that is the beauty of being able to express yourself freely in a society. That's not something that the UK likes. In fact, the UK is right now destroying freedom of expression by arresting people, putting them in prison for saying things that is not even that significant in life, because it hurts some people's feelings. So if you want to talk about a dictator, you have an elected dictator right in the UK. But Cayman reminds me of a prostitute. We'll accept whatever as long as it's convenient for us. And we're not principled. And I think what has happened to the world is that we've had a degree of peace since World War II that many of the generations that live today don't appreciate what it costs to get the degree of freedom that we currently enjoy. And what has happened is that it has resulted in people who are weak and don't understand what it means or what it costs to maintain the degree of freedom that we have been able to achieve. And so we're willing, like when you don't have anything and you're struggling for something, you go above and beyond to sort of get ahead, right? But then after you've achieved a significant degree of wealth, just use that language, then you're kind of like cautious. You don't want to lose it. So, you're not quite as aggressive as you were when you were trying to achieve it. That's where I think we are as globally. We're weak. We're unprincipled. We're cowards. And we use language that soften what is really terrible things that are happening to just pacify our conscience that it's not so bad.
Okay, leave us there, Denny. Our guests have a little bit of limited time, so you can probably call back after they've left. But someone just sent me a breaking news report just now that says the U.S. attempts to seize a Russian-linked tanker in the Atlantic. If I have a final question, I have so many questions really for you guys. It seems like the hour went by so incredibly quickly. But if I had a final question, it's this. Do you see this situation with the U.S. talking about Greenland and other countries, and even now this situation just happened 15 minutes ago, it was posted with this tanker. Do you see this expanding into a much bigger global situation, potentially a world war where people are going to really have to choose sides here? Is that a real possibility?
Well, Sandy, let me go first. First, I love this forum that you put together, and the chat has been awesome. I love to see people's thoughts and what they put down. I have spent the last 5 years focusing in on Venezuela, and that's about all the bandwidth I have to be an expert on a certain topic. So I really can't comment on Greenland. I have done no research on that. I will say that I love Denmark, and I think they're a great country and a great ally. And I also agree. You know, Greenland is much like the Caymans; it's a territory, so there should be some degree of self-determination, I would assume, in what their future is.
Right. Okay, Dr. Homer.
I think the whole Greenland thing is just classic Trump. You know, he'll throw something out there to create sensationalism and keep talking about Trump, and he is a showman. He is a showman.
Yeah,
and I think I think the idea of the 82nd Airborne Division parachuting into Greenland to seize it is just crazy. I mean, already some of the people around Trump kind of have to mediate for in what he was trying to say is that we'd offer to buy it or something like that. I think this is just the kind of thing that Trump does because he enjoys it and he gets a kick out of it. And he gets a kick out of people talking about it. Kind of stuff. But no,
I guess we can't.
In all seriousness, Sandy, I think the chance of us actually military occupying Greenland are nil, and I think the support for Trump would evaporate very rapidly in that kind of a situation. So,
but of course, we got to take him seriously.
I wanted to say, we were once a colony of the United Kingdom.
Of course, right? That's right.
So we got rid of them for a reason. We don't like being colony. The Monroe Doctrine, we people talk about, is about ending imperialism in the Americas, right? So we are against that kind of thing. And
and the United Nation, I can't remember which, Denny probably could have helped me with this, but there is a United Nation remit as well to end, colonialism around the world and to have countries as much as possible be their own sovereign nations. So that is, I think it's Declaration or Resolution 1514, dating back to 1960. It was actually formalized in 1960. And really it's about everyone trying to be self-determining. And so that's important. Okay, well, I think we've made some headway. Like I said, we're going to continue this discussion by having different people from all over this experience. We do have hopefully some Venezuelans that we can actually have on the program. Dr. Homer, I know that you, I'm a bit sad that we didn't get into much of this, but in terms of the internal dynamics of Venezuela and some of the different factions that are there that are now going to be operating and potentially taking control, there is a real question about whether or not removing one singular guy is going to make any difference whatsoever in the Venezuelan experience and whether the country will get better. I mean, someone who lives there on a full-time basis, she happens to be abroad right now, but she was saying to me yesterday that the current government is already cracking down on anyone that they think may have supported this. And so, I don't know that this is going to be the kind of change that they were thinking it was going to be. And there's so many examples of where the U.S. has gone in and moved a leader, and it just simply has not worked out long term. We've got a whole list of those that we can talk about here in a second. But there is this real big question mark about, okay, you've removed Maduro. Now what? Is it really going to make a difference?
Well, you mentioned the Russian linked tanker that I don't know the details, but we've been monitoring it. I mean, the leverage we have is the Trump administration has made it very clear that that oil under sanction is not leaving Venezuela, and that is the lifeblood of that country. There's only two ways money are made in Venezuela: oil and drugs. and we've basically stopped both of them. And as brutally realistic as it may sound, I think Trump is less concerned about what happens internally to Venezuela as he is with the international consequences. It gets back to what we said. It is about the flow of drugs. It is about stopping the flow of narcotics. And if that can be done through democracy, great. And I know many of my Venezuelan brethren don't want to hear that. They want democracy. But as we've said, one of our goals is to arrange elections. And we have the power to impose elections on Venezuela. And I think right now, as I think we talked earlier, there's kind of two forms of Chavistas. They're the true believers who really are communists. They believe in communism. Rodriguez is a communist. You notice she's not been indicted for narcotics trafficking. The Cubans don't like narcotics trafficking. Narcotics traffickers do not do well in Cuba. I mean, there are true believers in the revolution. On the other side, there are the opportunists, right, who got into this. Diosdado Cabello was number 2 in his class at the academy. He's a brilliant man. You don't get that high without being brilliant. He saw the opportunities of the revolution. He's an opportunist. He's up to his neck in drugs. So there are ways you can divide this up. And as I think Rob, he's an expert, says, if you want to have a transition from dictatorship to democracy, you can't destroy the bureaucracy. You need the bureaucracy to make it happen. We don't want anarchy in the country. So the game right now is finding those who are willing to give it a democratic transition with the vision of we'll see what happens next. And those who realize that if law and order returns, they're going to prison. Okay, hardball. And so that is the game that's going on right now in Venezuela. So we'll see how that plays out over the next few weeks.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Homer Harkins, and Robert Burrell. Dr. Robert Burrell joined us this morning, bringing us some very interesting, dynamic and conversation to the table regarding the situation in Venezuela. I think we're going to continue the conversation with a number of different guests over, the coming weeks. And of course, we'll continue to watch how the regional as well as international dynamics develop a bit further. So thank both of you for joining us. We really enjoyed having you on today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care. All right. They're very busy, so they've got to get back to their lives. Authors and senior, fellow and researchers. Dr. Homer himself actually lived in Venezuela. And for all of that, we need to look at the facts. So, our guests obviously were sharing some of their opinions, some of it based on, like I said, their own experience having lived in Venezuela. But what I can tell you is by all accounts, Trump's actions have done nothing to impact, as the guest said, Venezuela's state-linked trafficking networks. They've disrupted some routes, but experts in this area, obviously this is not his area of expertise, I took that as an opinion of his. Experts in this area say that this has not been, Trump's actions has not significantly reduced the overall flow of cocaine and other drugs leaving Venezuela. Instead, they push traffickers to adapt and sometimes reroute. And so his key actions, again, have been sanctions and narco-terrorism framing. The administration designated Nicolas Maduro, his relatives, and the cartel de los Soles as narco-terrorist actors, imposing sweeping sanctions on individuals, oil shippers, and alleged cartel facilities tied to the regime. Now, having said that, and this is where we got to pay attention to things as and when they're happening. Just yesterday, I mean, this is, you cannot make this stuff up, and I certainly don't make it up. I try to pay attention to news around the world. But just yesterday, there was an admission. This indictment came down, and we do have Mr. Pierce Robinson, who's gone through the indictment with a fine-tooth comb. We're hoping to have him back on the program this week because we need to look at what the Americans are alleging. But what I can tell you is this cartel de los Soles that they claimed, the Americans claimed, was a, that Maduro was head of this drug cartel. Now they are admitting, since yesterday, this is breaking news, folks. They are admitting that that is a false claim. That is not correct. So when you look it up, the Justice Department has just dropped allegations that actually helped to topple and were the reason that the Americans were going in there to topple the Venezuelan leader. And they have basically said this was a made-up group. This is why, folks, I'm telling you, this is why nobody trusts the so-called imperialists. This is why nobody can trust the Americans. Let me be clear. They made up. Yeah? They claimed that this was a cartel that he was the head of, and this is state-sanctioned, narcotics and the narco state and blah, blah, blah. The Department of Justice yesterday now admits that that's made up. That's why nobody can trust the Americans. I'm sorry, but this is just like, you cannot make this stuff up. So if you think that this is all about drugs and that's been the narrative that you have been willing to support, how do you now feel knowing that the Americans would go as far as making up a cartel to say that President Maduro, my apologies, to say that President Maduro was part of this cartel that doesn't even exist? They've lied about that. I mean, come on now. You can't fabricate evidence against someone, no matter how terrible. And nobody's arguing that this man is a saint and that he's not a horrible person. I'm sure he's committed, more egregious just actions than any of us care to admit. But the question, once again, is how is it possible that the Americans can just make this stuff up as they go along, and then we are going to trust them? Trust comes from people actually being honest and telling the truth about what is happening on the world landscape. So, okay. This is what I'm telling you. In its updated indictments against Nicolas Maduro, this just broke yesterday, the United States Department of Justice has now quietly, but it's making headlines all over the world, dropped a claim that Cartel de los Soles is an actual standalone criminal organization, describing it instead as a patronage system and culture of corruption built around drug profits. So now critics are arguing that the U.S. officials actually inflated the label to sell a narco-terrorism narrative, which we heard our guest say, and recent court filings effectively concede that Cartel de los Soles does not exist as a discrete, provable group in the way that it was originally portrayed. Come on. Yeah? And yet you still have people like Pam Bundy and other Trump supporters who are still going out there utilizing this terminology and this fake information. This is how you undermine your position. You're all about truth and, a democracy and all this sort of stuff, but really, is that really what is your guiding force here? Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sandy.
Good morning, honey child.
I am just calling about this topic between Venezuela and America.
Yes.
And the rest of the world. It all a lie. It all about natural resources. They start from Africa. They went to Iraq. They gone to South America now.
Yes.
They soon come to the Caribbean.
Well, technically, we can say that they're there already with their actions with Trinidad and Tobago.
As soon as the world opened their eye to see, American sanction everybody. Who can sanction America when America do something wrong? Nobody. So as soon as the world start to break away from America and leave America alone, because America is loyal to nobody.
To
but
themselves
and
and
even
their own
themselves,
interests.
they're not even loyal to.
Yeah.
So as
It
soon
is pretty
as
wild.
the world leaders can open the eyes and stop selling out their country for penny and start taking care of the country or the country people, this world is going to be better off. Because what are we fighting for? Oil, gold, bauxite, diamond. This don't make sense. Look at a small country as Burkina Faso. Look how that country taking care of the people. And they're going after that man. For what? Because he's showing the world that the natural resource in each country can take care of their own people. So all they want to do is keep us in poverty, keep us working hard like slaves. As soon as the world open their eyes, as soon as the people start to open their eyes, they're going to realize that this is all just a game and a mimic for these politicians around the world. As long as they and their family can live well, we, the middle and the bottom class, have to continue working.
Yes.
We're not debating that we don't have to work, but each country has its own wealth that they can depend on. Why somebody should go into somebody's country to take the wealth, make up stories to take the wealth? Nobody's saying that Venezuela president is a diamond.
No,
saying
far from it. I
but
mean,
let
I
me
think we
ask
all
the
accept.
question.
Yes.
What is the difference between Venezuela president and the president of the United States now? There's no difference. So let us call it for what it is. And let me stop making up this story and putting icing on a cake and make it look nice. They're thieves. That's what they are, thieves. And they're greedy. Because even though they're thieving other country wealth to make their country wealthy, look at what is going on in the U.S. They still don't have a healthcare. They still have a healthcare problem. They still have the most poverty in the world. Let us talk it for what it is. So they're only stealing people's wealth to benefit themselves, the upper class, nobody else. They're thieves. They're greedy.
Yep.
So let us stop coming on and sugarcake it, but now they won't go to this country and that country. They're just greedy and thief. Maybe call it for what it is. And stop pretending. And the Caribbean need to open their eyes. They're all talking about, we're going to lose our visa. Do you want a visa to go to a country that doesn't care about your country? That walks all over you? You want to send deportees to other people's country? Send them back to where they belong. And don't send the criminals to other people's country. Don't pressure them to take other people's problems. We have our own problem in each country. If you want to send deportees, you send them or do whatever you want to do with them, but don't pressure the Caribbean to take other country deportees and those things.
I think it was just yesterday that we saw that was it Dominica? Which country was all of a sudden being labeled by Trump as a particular thing? Again, same thing, using these convenient labels. They're drug countries, they're this, they're that. And as soon as they agree to take these criminals, deportees, all of a sudden, you're good, you can get your visa back.
Yes,
it's like,
that's what I'm saying.
What the hell?
People need to start opening their eyes.
Yes.
Listen, like I say to them, I don't care. I see something wrong, I'll say it wrong. I'm not going to see something and sugarcake it. No.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you're the person that's upholding that person's wickedness.
Yep.
So the sooner we start to come out
it's pretty
upfront,
shocking how quickly he can label countries as one thing, and then once they do what the Americans want, no, you're good.
So let me ask a question to each other. Who sells the drugs in America? Not Americans? So who buy the drugs from these countries? Americans.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Now, let me ask you a question. They're down in Guyana taking out all the oil, 98% of the oil. What Guyana having? Nothing. They went to Africa. They went everywhere, and everybody put them out now.
Oh, it was
natural
Prime Minister
resource.
Roosevelt Skerritt on Monday announced that Dominica has entered into an agreement with the United States to facilitate the transfer of third world refugees to the island to address situations in which the U.S. is unable to return these individuals to their own country. Why are we getting involved in this? Why is Dominica getting involved in this? Poor Skerritt. Seriously?
Oh, and yesterday, Guyana just agreed on taking third party too, because they're scared of. Listen, do they know that the crime that they're bringing into these Caribbean countries? No, they don't care as long as they get rid of them. They don't care. And I'll be back to this question again. Americans sanction everybody, but who sanction America?
Yeah. And let me say this as well, caller, because this demonstrates how regionally we are so weak, and we have world leaders who are they just kiss somebody else's rear end, right? Because even this lady in Venezuela who won the Nobel Peace Prize, do you see now where, because she can't become, Trump has put her on the side burner because she wouldn't share her Nobel Peace Prize with him, I wouldn't give it to him. Now, all of a sudden, he's basically snubbed her. Her name is, she's opposition leader there in Venezuela, Machado, but she's actually living overseas. She's now saying that, her coalition government can lead Venezuela, but she's also willing to share her peace prize with Trump. So when I heard that yesterday or the day before, I couldn't believe my ears, because I'm like, what the heck? These people are so weak to get something for herself, right? Which is essentially to get into good standing with the Americans. She has said she would share her peace prize, her Nobel Peace Prize with Trump. I'm just like, you guys have no spine. You have no backbone. It's actually pretty disgusting.
We got to ask ourselves a question. Why would I want to share anything with Donald Trump that makes me who he is? That means that my character is the same as him as long as I accept what he's doing. We have to say right is right and wrong is wrong. We have to separate the two.
I've never even heard this whole, this whole Nobel Peace Prize. They might want to look at this again, because I've never even heard of this, that you can actually share a Nobel Peace Prize after you've been awarded it. Like, what does that even mean?
Listen, he was so desperate for a Nobel Prize that he had to ask FIFA to make up a Nobel Prize to give him one. Who does that? Tell me who does that. That's desperation. To look good. Now, how can you say you're a president for stopping how many war, but how many war you're creating? Come on. People need to open their eyes, be wise. They got to be wise as a serpent. That's what they need to do.
Thank you, my dear. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Sandy.
We got a few more clips here that we're going to be watching again on this point about what the Venezuelan opposition leader has said. Have a look at this. Uh-oh. Do we not have audio on this one? Oh, gosh. All right. Let me see if I can get the audio. Because, yes, she has claimed that, she will share it with Trump, which I was thinking, when they awarded it to her, was there any stipulations in there that, oh, by the way, you can share this with somebody else? Like, it's really weird. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was thinking to myself, this is mad crazy. So she claims that she's going to present it to Trump. Damn, this is a new form of kissing somebody's bonke when the bonke is really big. Anywho, let me see if I can find a English version of this. A lot of these are in Spanish. Let me just see if I can find one that's in English. So yeah, she's gonna share her award with him. Boy, I tell you. I mean, listen, nobody likes a dictator, and some of you are questioning if even Trump is a dictator, but one thing we know for sure is that we also don't like a dictator, but we also don't like people who have no balls. I don't even know how to say it any other way except wowee. Because again, you put those people in a leadership role, and what is the outcome going to be for the people of their own country? And so by all accounts, Trump has snubbed her, and her response now that he has ousted what's his name? Oh gosh. That he has ousted Maduro is that she will actually share her prize with him. Lord Jesus, take the wheel. All right, let's hear what else Trump has been saying the last couple of days.
All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military working with U.S. law enforcement successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. We are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's what he says. That's what they're all about. And then have a listen to this.
Are declaring war against these cartels, and Congress is likely to approve of that process. Why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. Okay.
OMG. Listen, when I hear a clip like that, okay, here's the thing, right? Our guest said that, Trump is really brilliant and he's so intelligent. When I hear a clip like this, as I've heard many clips about Trump speaking, the one thing our guest said that I'm on point, I agree with that opinion, is that he is a great showman. He believes that the world is a reality TV show because that's how he even got elected as US president, right? Does that translate into brilliance? I don't personally think so. And when I hear him speak and say things like this, that is when I go, this is the guy that you claim is so intelligent. He doesn't even speak intelligently, not for nothing, but he sounds, anyway, let's just keep playing because I want y'all to hear what the man says, right? Not what I have to say about him or what I think, because he does the best job of telling people who he is and what his position is in a number of different things.
We will stop racing to topple foreign, and you understand this, foreign regimes that we know nothing about. This destructive cycle of intervention and chaos must finally, folks, come to an end.
Wow. Does MAGA have amnesia, or are they just a cult?
We need to hear this one again, because I think y'all might have missed this one.
We will stop racing to topple foreign, and you understand this, foreign regimes that we know nothing about. This destructive cycle of intervention and chaos must finally, folks, come to an end.
Wow. Does MAGA have amnesia, or are they just a cult?
I mean, again, in his own words, and there's multiple times that he has said this, that he was against the principle of going into these foreign regimes that we, being the Americans, know nothing about. And then he turns around and does the exact same thing. It's like, huh? What? So a lot of you are royally confused, as am I, by, again, what is the policy? What is the policy of the American people? Because it seems to change by the minute. And this is why, when I said he acts like he's schizophrenic to my guess, it's because he's literally all over the place with what it is that he's doing. So it can be very, very confusing. So let's have another look at another clip. And again, these are things that Trump himself have been saying. We don't have to make up anything and put things into his words. Jonathan claims that these are AI generated. Jonathan, I would challenge you to say that you can find these original clips from more than one source, and you'll find out that they were not AI generated. But here we go. Here's more with dates. We're going to give you dates this time, Jonathan, so you can go fact check it for yourself.
He's going to start a war because...
All right, so this is April 27th, 2023. And again, you can, this was on one of his rallies. I'm sure you can find this quite easily.
Said, oh, he's going to start a war because they said I had that personality to start a war. They remember that? Oh, we can't vote for him. He's going to start a war. No, I used my personality that we didn't have to have wars. I was the first president in decades who started no new wars. Who started no new wars and no new wars. No new wars. We don't need the wars. Foreign lands, countries you've never heard of, countries that don't even want us there. I was the first president in decades who started no new wars. I was the first president in decades who started no new wars. We will expel the warmongers from our government. You know, we never got into a war with me. I have a great record. We had peace. We had prosperity. We had no wars. We had no wars. That started no wars. We didn't have a war. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will expel the warmongers from our government. And we had no wars. When you see all the people that died in these horrible wars in the Middle East and everything else, countries didn't want us. Look at Trump. Just look at this guy. He's going to go to war. He's going to take us. No. Look at me. I'm the one that kept us out of war. You know, I'm the only president that didn't start a war. I didn't start a war. This president, no wars. Started no wars. You're going to end up in a war. Or war or no war. They like a war. They love wars. You know, they love killing people. It's so wonderful. You know, I'm the only president in many, many decades that didn't start a war. They're the party of endless wars. I was the first president in decades who started no new war. There were wars all over. He said, bring back Trump. It'll all end. It all ended. We had no problem. I'm going to keep you out of wars. I kept you out of wars. We had no wars with Donald Trump as your president. Remember when crooked Hillary Clinton used to say, he's going to get us into a war. Look at him. Look at his rhetoric. I said, no, my rhetoric's going to keep us out of wars. That's what happened.
All right. No wars, no wars. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program. No wars.
Good morning, Sandra. How you doing?
Jonathan, morning. How are you?
I just want to know, were you referring to me, Jonathan Allen, that said that? Because I want you to tell me when I ever said that any of that was AI generated, if it was me you were referring to.
This comment says they weren't the originals AI, but they certainly have excelled at it.
What? No, that's not answering Al. They were the original, Al said, to the effect.
Oh, Al. I thought that was AI. Wow.
No, Al. My brethren, Al.
Okay. I see. All right. Well, I can't.
Yeah, they weren't the original pirates.
I can't see who
people have been being pirates.
No. I thought you were referring to the
time memorial.
No, I thought you were referring to the videos.
Yeah, I mean, good God, you want to talk about brethren coming into Southern Europe on the top of elephants? Come on, man.
No. I just
want to ask you, previous caller. Maybe I'll just say this to make a statement to it. Madam, whoever you are, I don't know you. Good morning. I suggest that you go and ask a Venezuelan what the difference is between Maduro and T-Rump. Lady, if you're listening, go ask a genuine Venezuelan. There's been a Venezuelans here in the Cayman Islands who have had to leave their country and make their life here. Ask them the difference between Maduro and Trump. You know, Sandra, listen, I don't know. It's up to conjecture what will happen for Venezuela's population moving forward. I hope that they do reach some level of a valid and sustainable democracy. I really and truly do.
And that hope,
Okay.
Jonathan, let me just be clear. That hope will be coming from
Them
no. That's coming from a track record of when the Americans have done this. Let's go through the list briefly.
I know
Syria,
the list. I know the list.
Somalia, Haiti, Cuba, Chile, Guatemala, Iran, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Libya, and Iraq. So many failed.
There's no doubt, Sandra, that United
these
States
are all
of America,
the major
over the
failures.
years, over the years,
where is
United
this
States
hope
of
coming
America
from?
has been happy to put in for their own political expediences and for their own national interests, murderous dictators. Nobody who is going to be either objective or who is going to be intellectually honest is going to ever try to argue otherwise. That is fact. They have the United States of America government is culpable in those acts in world history. No, who is going to deny that? But to try to inculcate all of that into this present situation, right? You know, look, this is geopolitics. I don't know about you, but I don't want China running this side of the world. You know, you made mention of what China does, building bridges and so on. It's not for favor. It's so that they can come into a poor country, take advantage of the poor country, further their own colonialist, imperialist exploits, build a dock, build a bridge, build infrastructure, knowing full well that that country, not only are they implementing massive amounts of corruption, can I speak to McKeever Bush and our history here? Okay, in order to fulfill that, but then they leave that population fully knowing, unable to repay it with the long game of then owning those people's country or that specific piece of infrastructure in the future. Okay, that's the geopolitical part and parcel of this. You do not need to be an American Trumpist. You do not need to be anything like that in order to understand the threats which Russia poses to the side of the world, which China and Iran pose. Okay, so if people would open their eyes to this reality, and I'm just going to finish on this one here for you, Sandra.
Yes, sir.
There are so many people here in Cayman who want to yip and yap about the colonialist this and the bad white man this and that. However, our main pillar of our economy, if you want to call it ours, is the financial services industry. And I would suggest to anybody here in the Cayman Islands, if you really give a damn about any of that, go watch The Spider's Web, Britain's Second Empire on YouTube. Open your eyes to the reality of the place that the Cayman Islands, among others, play as a child prostitute, as a satellite pawn for the Bank of England, which is directly responsible for all of the abuse that has taken place in places like Africa and other countries. All of the people, all of the dictators of Africa who shunt their ill-gotten gains into places like the Cayman Islands, all of the murderous dictators, all of the greed-induced corporate multinational corporations, all of these people that everybody here in Cayman seem to be becoming some kind of socialist blum, right? Go look in your own mirror and go walk around Georgetown. Because Cayman and Caymanians are playing into this game, right? So you have no problem being very comfortable with what it is affording here in the Cayman Islands as a pillar of our economy. And then on the same hand, you're going to start cussing about it and blaming Trump for every damn thing that's wrong in the world. And it's not fact, right? The Spider's Web, Britain's Second Empire. Look it up on YouTube. Open your eyes. Then look yourself in the mirror. You're not going to change none of what they're doing. Change what you're doing first.
Oh, I think he just hung up. All right, then. Okay. So, like I said, nothing better than having the person, in their own words, listen to what they have to say. My apologies. I thought he was talking about AI. He was talking about Al. Poor Al says they always getting his name mixed up now with AI. He says, I knew this was addressed to me. From AI came in. Al, always get notifications mixed up, mixing me up with AI. Oh, Lord. RMR says, Jonathan is fear-mongering and peddling the typical U.S. and British politicians' propaganda. The U.S. has been doing everything he's speaking of for decades. Our financial sector is owned and operated by the city of London. Good morning to Miss Mary. Miss Mary says, I've been listening, and like so many are just waiting patiently for the government in the U.S. to impeach him. He's so wicked, and most Americans really hate what he is doing. Alicia says, what's the difference between IMF loan and a China loan? Yes. Patricia says the spider's web. Anthony says Jonathan for hashtag 2029. Gabby says, boy, the amount of Trump expletive suckers is hilarious. You fill in the blank. Begins with a D. The man can't do wrong in their eyes. Just throw law out the window and let every country be free to do as they please. Who is Jonathan? Says John LaRue. All right. One person said earlier, we can be of two minds. No one is unhappy that Maduro is gone. However, the U.S. invading another sovereign country and abducting its president is contrary to international law. The mere fact that Trump has declared the U.S. Will be running the country, and that it was about the oil all along, saying that he had been in touch with the American oil companies before and after the invasion to sell the oil, is telling. Regime change has never worked for the USA. There is history to prove it. Trump could care less about the people of Venezuela, and Trump has now been emboldened to want to take over Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, Canada, and Greenland, and the USA is now becoming the world's worst bully. These guys are crazy if they think Trump is rational and about human rights. Did they watch his speech to the Republicans yesterday? So again, we revert to what Trump says in his own words.
All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military working with U.S. law enforcement successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. We are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're all about.
Okay. So he says that he's going to run the country. And I can tell you that was said on Saturday at the press conference that he had at Mar-a-Lago. And by Sunday, his leadership started to backtrack from that. So again, this is when I was talking about what is the American position? What is the American policy? They're not even within their own party, in their own group, they don't seem to be of a singular playbook. Like he says one thing, and then by the next day, they're backtracking like, oh, no, we're not going to run the country. We're going to let the Venezuelans do it. And it's like, which is it? It's very hard to follow exactly what it is that they're doing. In relation to other countries, such as Greenland, have a listen to this.
I'd like to take this opportunity to send a message directly to the United States of America. The US is a big country and Denmark is a small one. We have looked up to you and you have inspired us. Because since the Second World War, you have defended the free world, created prosperity and progress, peace and freedom. And we have tried to give back to you by always supporting you and by showing up every time you called. In us, you have a friend that has always kept our word, a friend you have always been able to rely on. There is nothing I want more than for our friendship to continue. Because if we let ourselves be divided as allies, then we do our foes a favor. And I will do everything that I can to prevent that from happening. Therefore, when you ask our businesses to invest in the US, they do. When you ask us to spend more on defense, we do. And when you ask of us to strengthen security in the Arctic, we are on the same page. But when you demand to take over a part of the kingdoms of Denmark territory, when we are met by pressure and by threats from our closest ally, what are we to believe in about the country that we have admired for so many years? The country that, if any, have stood up for others' freedom. You know us, you know what we stand for, and you know that we don't give in. And that is why I have to say very clearly, national borders, sovereignty of states, and our integrity, these are all principles rooted in international law. These are fundamental principles formed after the Second World War so that small countries don't have to fear big ones. And so, this is not only about Greenland or Denmark. This is about the world order that we have built together across the Atlantic over generations. You cannot annex another country, not even with an argument about international security.
Yes, there we have Greenland's official position. I mean, it's shocking that they could even say that. And you know, a guest said, oh, well, you know, he'd probably just buy it from them. I mean, that's not what he has said. Believe the man. When somebody tells you something, believe them. He said he will take it. And if people are going to die, then people are going to die. It is what it is. Amy, good morning. Amy says, anyone else agree that superpower tensions are also made up and just a perceived threat because the tyrant they can't accept, that people are allowed to have different ways of life, and that they want to have control over the public they rule. They're both the same, and they both propagandize their people to control the masses. So I think she's saying that the US is no different than, you know, any of these superpowers, Russia, China, they're all pretty much the same, except the US uses the term democracy to get you to believe that what they're doing is somehow better for the world. Amy goes on to say maybe the US should run proper elections then so that they can have free elections instead of kidnapping their leader and stealing their oil. Few more clips. This one again about the USA running Venezuela.
It was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine.
Okay, so you see that long pause? That's when you're stumped because you don't have any legal authority to run another country like that. And so listen to how he goes on to respond.
Quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And that's what we intend to do.
All right, let me just back that up, because he says it very, very loud and clear. It's not even about what's in the best interest of the Venezuelan people. He kind of adds that as an afterthought. First and foremost, it is what is in the best interest of the United States of America. Let's listen again.
President Trump was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And that's what we intend to do. So that leverage remains, that leverage is ongoing, and we expect that it's going to lead to results here. We're hopeful that it does, positive results for the people of Venezuela, but ultimately, most importantly for us, in the national interest of the United States. We will no longer have, hopefully, as we move forward here, we'll set the conditions so that we no longer have in our hemisphere a Venezuela that's the crossroads for many of our adversaries around the world, including Iran and Hezbollah, is no longer sending us drug gangs, is no longer sending us drug boats, is no longer a narco-trafficking paradise for all those drugs coming out of Colombia to going through the Caribbean and towards the United States. And obviously, we want a better future for the people of Venezuela. We want them to have an oil industry where the wealth goes to the people, not to a handful of corrupt individuals and stolen by, pirates all over the world. That's what we're working towards, and we intend to use the leverage we have to help achieve that.
Let me ask the question again. What is the legal authority for the United States to be running Venezuela?
Well, I explained to you what our goals are and how we're going to use the leverage to make it happen. As far as what our legal authority is on the quarantine, I'm very simple. We have court orders. These are sanctioned boats, and we get orders from courts to go after and seize these sanctions. So I don't know, is a court not a legal authority?
Okay. And he says that, their remit here is to make life better for the Venezuelan people and that they can profit from the oil. But yet in the same breath, we just heard President Trump saying all weekend after this about how they're going to make the American oil companies, who largely funded him and his party and his campaign, they're going to let the American oil companies now go in there and rebuild and invest in the infrastructure there so that they can make money. What do American oil companies have to do with the people of Venezuela? I'm confused, but let's go to the next caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Morning, dear.
Yeah, we really have to look at everything from all angles. Because number one, in all honesty, Russia and China are just not being here for being here sick. They go nowhere for nowhere sick.
Well, nobody does.
Right,
I mean,
no, but seriously, they're way over there. Nobody goes near Taiwan. If they do, it's another story. Right in Jamaica, they have bought out the whole Western terminal, that whole port. They govern who.
I think you might, I don't know if you're listening to the radio in the background, but you might have to turn that down for me.
Okay, but can you still hear me then?
Sorry?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, it's just a bit of an interference coming in.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah. So they govern who comes, who goes. What I'm seeing here, as I said, I was listening to a documentary on the radio. I don't know, BBC or somewhere, and they're explaining that the oil that is there is so crude, it's like tar. And in the beginning, it was American companies that had the facility to turn this tar into usable oil, right? Some companies were left back there, some came out. All he's saying is that these same companies will go back in there with their equipment because China is there with their equipment. Russia is there doing the same thing and selling the oil also to India and wherever, right? So all he's saying is that it is going to go back to how it was, right? The facilities to change this hard tar type of thing back to usable oil, and they will still responsible for selling it. And the money will go to Venezuela to benefit the people. I am connected to somebody who was living there for years, right? And if we don't watch it, even right in New York, there is about 8 million that say left that country with something on their back, a bag on their back. Because when Chavez went in, all happened is that their bank accounts were seized. They owned nothing. Who is connected to me, family-wise, in-law-wise? They had a good job there in a hospital and in another company. And when they went down there to visit, they couldn't get a penny because what? Nobody owned their account anymore. You had nothing. And if we don't watch it right in New York there, the same thing can happen. Because they're talking about, not property don't belong to you, and this don't belong to you, and that don't belong. And when you hear from the show, where are they going to get this money to do all of their promises? It's a form of the start of socialism. The people in Venezuela will tell you so. In Miami, if you listen to them, they're waiting to go back to their country. Somebody has to do the dirty work. It might seem dirty and hard and unfair, but the outcome, let us wait. Biden put a $25 million on Maduro's head. Nothing was done. It was just a word.
So let me say this, caller. You say we have to wait. History should be something we reflect on. There is no success story that I can think of where the Americans have removed a leader as in this case, and it has actually worked out. So what are you placing your hope on exactly? And in fact, in most jurisdictions, it's gotten worse.
Okay. The point is that at some time, a difference will show up. All the other ones that were removed. You look at what you mean, Norway, Norway, and Panama. Same thing, drugs and wickedness. But what I'm saying is, most of those places, it was a war, boots on the ground war. Let us see how things are going to work out. But somebody have to do a job. Right? I believe it's not the person. It's the name. It's a light and darkness war. It's a spiritual war, because what God says in his Bible, he will put a trumpet sound in nations to turn them back to God. That's the word. I'm not saying this is the case. But there's nothing under God's Son that man do that is any good in certain eyes. You understand? Nothing. And everybody cannot be all wrong, and there's nobody all good. Give credit where it is due. The man is a wicked man. And God said he will put an end to the wicked plans. It doesn't matter how it's done, who he used to do it, or when it is done, where it is done. That's his word. So we have to be careful how we talk, because we do not know the plans of the living God who rules over everything. And man is just a breath. My God, that's why David said he'd rather fall in the hands of God than in the hands of man. Because if anybody could take Donald Trump up, I'm not, people that don't live in America, it's a spirit of hatred and anger and death and destruction that reigns from that other party. It's not the same party that was in place in John Kennedy's time and other democratic time. It's a malicious, it's a spirit. They don't see anything else than a wicked person. Don't care what you do. And we have to be fair with ourselves. Let us not allow ourselves to fall victim to the force of darkness that can't see no good. If God didn't want him there or anybody there, it's nothing for him to take his breath out of a person. We must be careful, because so we throw a stone, we don't know what God is seeing in us, in our hearts, that is wicked in his eyes. And he has to use somebody. You know, he uses
we have another caller.
Somebody.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Thank you.
Let us. Okay. Bye.
Yes. Thank you so much, my dear. All right. Next caller, you're up. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Sandra.
Hello, honey.
Hello.
Hello, Thelma Lou.
Hello. Yeah, she's right here listening. Anyways, we were busy for 2 days, so we didn't get to listen to you. We had to take kitties in to get fixed. Finally, we got a vet doctor. So
that's good. Are they permanently stationed in Cayman Brac, or are they just visiting?
Dr. Miller comes for like a 6-month sabbatical type of thing.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So in between that is when we have nobody, you know, just Dr. Brenda will visit periodically. And other than that, you got to put the cats on the plane and hopefully they can take them and get them to Grand. Anyways, I'm not going to be, I just want to say this. I love President Donald Trump. Somebody gotta love him, so I love him. I know.
I don't think you're alone there, though. I think there's lots of people who love him. So it's not for lack of loving that is his problem.
Right. Now, I've sat here and I've watched the system with all the drug trade and the human trafficking went on even through our country in the 80s and 90s. We had a lot of that. A lot of it was flowing through here. And it still is. It's just not as much, I guess. I don't know. Maybe we're paying more attention to it more than anything. But the mere fact that he's trying to block that from coming into his country, And I'm not talking about marijuana, because we the people voted for it to be decriminalized. And if they don't hurry up and get that going,
but the Venezuelan drugs this is the fact now that I have to fact check you, because the Venezuelans are not the ones who are sending drugs to the U.S. That's coming largely from Mexico. So that's a fact.
I guess. So what is he saying, that there's so much drug drug boats in the Caribbean? We know there's a lot of them.
That's called a false hearing, because they're not impacting the United States of America. I'm not saying there's not drugs in Venezuela and then whatever, but they're not shipping. Venezuelans are not shipping their drugs to the U.S. And the fentanyl,
maybe they're shipping it to Mexico.
No, Bobo. The fentanyl craze is that's Mexico. The material to make fentanyl largely coming from China, and so those are the people he needs to talk to.
Well, and I mean, I also understand the underbelly of some of this to do with all the oil that was stolen from the American oil companies. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm also reading now. And he wants his American companies want their oil that they paid Venezuela for. Mm-hmm. So they should get it, right? I don't think they should not. It should be a situation where it's held hostage. And if he's dealing with it in that sense, well, let him deal with it. I don't see anything wrong with stopping all these boats, and there's full of drugs and all of this going on, and
he's stopping oil
human
tankers.
Trafficking and everything else.
Hold on,
involved.
He's stopping oil tankers if they can. There was one that they couldn't stop because the Russians actually took it and put the flag. They were chasing it for, I think, a couple of weeks, and then the Russians took it and put their flag on it. But I mean, I think whatever we want to support, we got to make sure that the basis of that support is based in facts. So here's what I'm telling you, right? Venezuela. Let's be clear. Venezuela is involved in the cocaine trade mainly as a transit route, not as a primary producer, or a state that officially provides drugs to the U.S. Much of the cocaine, because it is cocaina, that passes through Venezuela is not even bound for the United States of America. Now, by contrast, Honduras drugs bound for the U.S. And in fact, their president, in a court of law, their president, evidence was adduced that he said, let's push as much cocaine up the nose of the gringas as possible. And yet Trump pardons him. You got to explain this to me. If Trump really cares about drugs, explain this to me. How?
There's probably something there that the reason they did that.
Of course.
There's always a reason
there
for it.
There was somebody lobbying for him that is very, very close to Trump. And there was money involved in that whole lobbying situation. That's the reason for it.
I don't think Trump takes money from anybody about anything. He don't need it.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think he don't even take a salary for his presidential job. So I don't see him taking any money. He don't need it, be honest. But I mean, if he's trying to save his country, and we know that there's such there's so many young people in the U.S. that are on these heavy drugs, a lot of it. And the flow of it is coming in droves and whatever. He's probably searching for the actual the culprit or the core or the starting point of it or whatever.
That can't be Venezuela then. If that is your position, then that is not Venezuela. That is a fact.
Venezuela has been a mess for years.
Well, nobody's
look at the
debating
value of their dollar.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with Trump? Is Trump going to go? Jamaica is a mess too. The value of their dollar. The Philippines is a mess with the value of their dollar. So is Trump going to go in and invade Jamaica and take out?
I don't think Jamaica has anything richer than bauxite that he can get, but other than coffee, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. It's too small a country, I guess. I'm just saying, I have no idea what their actual core idea of it is.
That's the
but
point.
The fact of the matter is, I support the stopping of the drugs that are coming to the States.
That's not going to stop.
I support that.
I want you to be clear.
And if it means that
that's
these
not going to stop that.
Well, he can try.
Because it's not coming from there. So if it's not coming from there, why are you messing with them and claiming it's the drugs? It's not the drugs.
It's something.
Meanwhile,
Honduras, we're going to soon hear about it. Don't worry. We're
Honduras,
going to soon hear
cocaine,
about
the
it.
drug cartels move roughly 300 to 400 tons of cocaine through Honduras to the United States of America. That's what that man was convicted of. We got to play with facts here. But thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it. I'm fact checking a lot of you here this morning. And Damien said something that I need to fact check. You know, you can't just throw stuff out there and hope that it's going to stick when you are not prepared to deal with facts. So Damien said the following. Okay, hold on one second. Let me find the comment. Damien said Obama had a 15 million bounty, then Biden raised it to 25 million, and then Trump $50 million. Maduro has been wanted from 2015. So I'm assuming, Damien, that when you said Obama had a $15 million bounty, that you were actually referring to a bounty on Maduro. Well, that is factually incorrect. You see, this is where y'all just throw any kind of shit up against the wall. You're like a 5-year-old Play-Doh. You know when your 5-year-old is playing with Play-Doh and they don't know the exact amount of water to add and the right formula? They just kind of push it together and stick it, slap it on the wall. If it sticks, it sticks. If it don't stick, it don't stick. But this is factually incorrect. Let me fact check you and tell you what the true position is. Obama did not put a $15 million bounty on Maduro. Okay? Obama's key action in 2015 was an executive order number 13692, declaring a national emergency and imposing sanctions on Venezuelan officials, not a monetary bounty. So if you can't even get that kind of stuff right, what the hell? The first criminal indictment and cash reward for Maduro came in 2020 under the Trump administration, not 2015 under Obama. Please fact check yourself before you come on the show, because we're going to start fact checking y'all more and more. All right? This is an opinion. You're stating it as though it's a fact and you got it all wrong. So saying that Maduro has been wanted from 2015 muddles the water. So in 2015, U.S. sanctions / national emergency against the regime. Yes, no bounty. 2020, under Biden, there was a bounty that was put in, an indictment plus a $15 million award. And then Trump doubled that. So let's be clear. The U.S. put a $50 million reward on Maduro in 2020 under Trump. So it first was done under Trump. Biden later increased it to $25 million in early 2025. And then Trump's second term, which he started in late January, he raised it again to $50 million. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sandy.
Hello.
I just have a few comments. So the first one is that I know that if someone is a Trump supporter, there is no amount of fact that you will throw out to them that they will accept. So that's one thing. But this whole Venezuela thing, my concern is if they can do this to Venezuela, they can do this to any country. It doesn't matter who it is or what they've done. As long as they just peddle any type of information, then they can just go in and do it. That's my main concern. And it's also concerning that the international community, let's say the UN courts or anything like that, they're not even coming up and stepping up. So it's just a Trump world right now. And people aren't educating themselves enough to even understand why he's doing what he's doing. He said it, but then they always say, oh, that's not what he means. He said it. He means it.
I mean, I don't, it's like you pick and choose what you believe from the man when it coming from his own lips.
I know.
I don't understand. That's weird.
It's so disheartening, and to think that there's so many people who think he's doing the right thing. He really isn't. It's a sovereign country. Yeah. And there are laws against that. Yeah. So whether he's a dictator or whatever it is, they should have never done it. They've just put the whole region in.
Yeah, and I mean, real change, like when we look at the history of how real change comes about, right? Real change has to come from inside of the country. And I get it. I mean, with dictators, you know, people have had to leave, you know, your life is at risk and, you know, but there have been successful countries where they have turned over dictatorship rule, but they do it with civil, even the United States of America. They have their own civil wars and they sort themselves out. They do it through the courts, right? They do it through citizens protesting in the street to have a right. You don't have a foreign country go in and remove a leader and think that that's going to fix your problems long term, because practically every example of that has proven that that does not fix the problem. It makes it worse. Haiti, the U.S. has had multiple interventions in Haiti, and the outcome has been chronic political instability, weak institutions, and recurring crises. There's no durable leadership or institutional success at all. Even Cuba, who they're now talking about, right? Do you know that in the 50s and 60s and 30s, no one was more in Cuba's rear end and up in that country than the American and the American mafia, I should add? They had a stronghold in Cuba. They were living the Caribbean life in Cuba. They built a lot of the infrastructure that you now see there in Cuba, as a matter of fact. Right? And when they try a regime change in Cuba, it simply has not worked.
Yeah, it hasn't worked. It will
the
never
Bay of
work.
Pigs invasion, total failure. And all they did was strengthen Cuba and push Cuba closer to the USSR. How is that a success? That is one of the most embarrassing operational and strategic defeats ever. Chile, 1973, before most of us were even born. They tried to undermine Salvador Allende and prevent socialist consolidation. Same thing. They're trying to change the political landscape of the entire world towards their viewpoint of what a democracy should be and what it should look like. And what did they do instead? The outcome was to put in military dictatorship under Pinochet and all sorts of human rights violations. And the verdict of all of this was democratic rollback and not a democratic gain. The Americans have not been successful. Guatemala, 1954. We need to look at history to really ascertain whether this is going to even make a difference. Let's say we accept, right, that the Americans did this for some good reason, which we know they didn't. But let's accept that regime change was needed by force there. The history proves that it will not come about, because there's not been any successful cases of it, not when it's done in this particular way. Yes, Maduro needed to go. He was an abhorrent man. His regime is horrible. How is that going to change now for the people of Venezuela? I agree that people of Venezuela deserve better.
Yes, they do. But this is not going to fix it. They're probably going to end up in a worse position, I dare say. I hope not. But it's just not going to work. So what it is now the country is going to be even more unstable, and the whole region. And then you've got big players who are also going to take part in this. And even today, the markets have just gone crazy. So the idea that Trump is this savior really isn't. And I don't know, I just wish people would just take time and actually read and find out the facts for themselves, because speaking to people, especially who love Trump, is just not working.
Yeah, I mean, they're entitled to love him, but like I say, they're not entitled to their own facts about what is actually happening and why it's happening. There is a stark difference there. Thank you so much, caller.
Thank you.
All right, my dear. So just a few more things here. Again, history it's hard to argue with history when you've never demonstrated any success. And you can't, what do they say? The very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and respecting different results. I can give you more examples. Iran, 1953, right? They were trying to remove Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, to stabilize pro-Western monocracy. What did it do? A little bit of short-term success, and in the long term, they had a blowback leading to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And it's one of the most consequential failures in U.S. foreign policy history. Vietnam, 1955 to 1975. They wanted to prevent communist takeover by supporting South Vietnamese leadership. What did they do? The collapse of South Vietnam, communist unification under Hanoi. Again, strategic and ideological defeat. Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021. They claimed that they were going to go in there and be out in a day, be out in 24 hours. What did they end up doing? They removed the Taliban, claimed to have defeated terrorism, stayed in another man's country for 20 years, built a democratic state. And as soon as they left, because the Americans can't stay there forever, the Taliban returned to power after U.S. withdrawal, and institutions have collapsed. And the longest U.S. war on foreign soil has ended in complete reversal. And the people in those countries are no better off than they were before. And in fact, some argue that they're worse off. Let's keep going. Libya, 2011. Again, they claim they were trying to protect civilians and support democratic transition after Gaddafi. The outcome, failed state, rival governments, militias, arms proliferation across Africa. Regime removal without state replacement is what happened. Iraq, 2003. Objective, remove Saddam Hussein, eliminate the weapons of mass destruction, build a stable democracy. Again, oh no, we can't find those weapons of mass destruction. You had a state collapse, sectarian civil war, rise of ISIS, expanded Iranian influence, and another strategic failure despite tactical success. Show me the wing and the hope and the prayer that you guys are putting your faith on with this Venezuela situation. Already we see, right? The Venezuelans are not going to do what Trump says. He claims, well, if she doesn't do it, she's going to get it worse, he says, than Maduro. Okay. Well, maybe you guys need to listen to what she's saying and what people that I've spoken to on the ground there in Venezuela are saying is now happening. You think then people are going to be able to run back home and have free speech and all this kind of stuff? Huh.
Rodriguez was the picture of defiance. Surrounded by regime loyalists, she called the U.S. operation barbaric,
Único presidente de Venezuela.
declaring Nicolás Maduro is the only president of Venezuela. Known to many in the country simply as Delcy, Rodriguez has been an influential and reliable regime enforcer for nearly 2 decades. She began in the government of Hugo Chavez, faithfully implementing the tenets of Chavismo, the nationalist populist movement that brought the Venezuelan economy to its knees. When Chavez died in 2013, she remained an assertive voice within President Maduro's government. Uncompromising in her rhetoric, she vilified the Venezuelan opposition and frequently warned the country about the threat of foreign intervention. CNN attempted to question her in 2016 after a CNN investigation uncovered a scheme to illegally sell Venezuelan passports out of the country's embassy in Iraq. Rodriguez, then the foreign minister, refused to comment to CNN on every occasion.
All right, so removing him is going to do what exactly for this country? When you have factions in the country, and let me just go back to, what our guests this morning, they didn't get into all of the details, but Dr. Hawkins has quite an extensive degree of history and experience, Center for Irregular Warfare and so on. But even he himself, as someone who's lived in Venezuela, talked about the different groups there. The Chavistas, who are deep into drug running, he says, cabello, and political repression, right? You have all of these heads there in Maduro and Venezuela who are working closely together. So you remove the head of the snake, but all the tentacles are still very much alive. What do you think is going to happen in this country? Now people are going to potentially be vying for power, but is this going to benefit the people of Venezuela? I don't think so. That's just my opinion. Like I said, we're going to invite Venezuelans on here and they can tell us whether or not it's going to benefit them at all.
God, Venezuelans are celebrating. It's only leftists and liberals that are upset that Maduro was captured. I would like to kindly jog everyone's memory because I know how forgetful we can be when it comes to history. So the year is 2003 and the US invades Iraq, and Iraqis are celebrating because they hate Saddam Hussein. So they welcome US invasion. They are in the streets celebrating.
People were just in pure exhilaration. At that point in time, you think this might just work. And I remember seeing a guy was carrying a huge couch on his back, and he turns and says, "Yay, America."
The US invades Iraq under the pretense that Saddam Hussein is harboring nuclear weapons, which, by the way, they never find. And between the years of 2003 to 2011, America kills over 1 million Iraqi people. The country becomes a failed state. And if you speak to Iraqis today, they will tell you how they have deep resentment towards the United States. The country that they once welcomed becomes the country that they deeply hate and resent, and rightfully so. Soon as the US leaves Iraq, the country then goes into the hands of ISIS, the terrorist organization. You see, it's very easy to start a war. It's very easy to take out a dictator. It's very easy to bring down a regime. These are things that I will never argue that America is not good at. America is great at these things, but it's incredibly difficult to end a war. It's incredibly difficult to establish a new government that brings stability to a nation. To install a new government, to bring stability to a nation, you have to create infrastructure, roads, school, hospitals. That costs money. And America is not in the business of charity, okay? America spent $2.7 trillion in Iraq, US taxpayer dollars. Where did that money go? Private military contractors. So when people are like, Venezuelans are celebrating, why can't you just be happy for them? My response isn't, oh, I must be wrong. My response is, I have seen this before. I don't just remember history. I lived through this history. And you can't say that we as Americans don't get to have an opinion on what happens in Venezuela when it's going to be our tax dollars that goes into creating violence and instability in Venezuela. Just like that $2.7 trillion that went to creating instability in Iraq was US taxpayer dollars. The last thing I want to say is that despite being critical of many different governments, I do not ever call for regime change in Iran, China, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, etc. because I don't have to deal with the consequences of what that would look like. That would be the total collapse of a system. Do you understand what I mean? Industries would collapse, currency would collapse, instability would immediately take over. I don't know how people feel so comfortable talking about regime change. Even if you live in diaspora, you don't have the right to call for regime change. And I wish people would be more sensitive to that.
Very interesting perspective indeed. And what I would say is, again, it's up to the people who are in that country to demand regime change. And yes, when you have a dictator in place, I completely agree. I think someone said, do I agree? Do I think he was a rightful leader? And he was democratically elected. I think that was Sia that asked that question. Absolutely not. But his people have the power to deal with him. Because again, having a foreign leader, a foreign country go in and try to push that change has not been successful. It has to happen from inside out. That is how real effective political change occurs, just like with the United States of America. The United States of America, how did they have real effective change? They had a civil war. Yes, millions of people lost their lives, and that's what happens when you're fighting for democracy within your own country. You have a choice. You either run and you don't fight, or you stay and you fight, and yes, you might lose your life. But the only way you will have lasting change is for you to do it the right way, inside out, not the other way around. So, I mean, if he's a legitimate president, no, he's not. He was not democratically elected. And again, who's the United States of America to deal with that under the guise and auspices of, oh, it's about the drugs? Let his own Venezuelans deal with him. On the opposite and flip side of this, the United States of America and Americans under the Trump administration in particular will say, oh, but Sandy, why do we have to be responsible for the world? You see, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth, right? So for example, if you say that Americans have an obligation to try to, save countries, and how they do that is they go around, helping countries and taking down, world leaders and whatever, because it's all about furthering democracy. Okay. Then they turn around and they cut U.S. aid under the same Trump administration for these foreign countries, people in Africa and other places that are now being devastated. They've had diseases that were on the brink of extinction or extinct that are now coming back. $6.5 billion per year have been put on of U.S. humanitarian assistance for sub-Saharan Africa have been put on freeze, creating a large gap where that funding was very much needed. Contributions to the UN humanitarian agencies, right? $17 billion in recent years. So let me ask you this question. The U.S. is trying to push democracy. And so therefore, they're going to do certain things to do that in Latin America. But on the same hand, in Africa, they're saying, well, you know what? We want to destabilize these countries. We want an outbreak of HIV and AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, Ebola, maternal and child health care, basic health systems in countries like Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Nigeria. We're going to pull this funding, forget about them and their food security and agriculture, because this funding helped with nutrition, famine prevention, climate resilient agriculture initiatives in the Sahel and other places in the world, assisted with funding gaps, raising risk, education and livelihoods, school children being fed, community schools, scholarships, vocational training. We're going to do away with all of that and expect there to not be a political consequence, right? So when one of the last callers said, well, Trump, hate him or like him, he's pushing for these democratic principles. And some of you in the comment section have said, we don't want China in this part of the world. We don't want Russia in this part of the world. We don't want any of the other big players. Well, when you have been providing funding for a big continent like Africa that have benefited in other places, but I'm going to give you the African example. And then because your president is not really that fond of Black people, he's going to cut all the funding for those programs, offer something for white-only South Africans, a program for them to be able to come to the U.S., cut visas and other programs for people, brown people, people of color, to come into the United States to get benefits, et cetera, et cetera. When China, Russia, and even the Middle Eastern, the Muslim communities that y'all claim you're so afraid of, when they start going into those countries and in those regions and filling those gaps, y'all don't see a problem with that? It's absolutely nonsensical for you to not see how someone is talking out of both sides of their mouths. Oh, we want to support democracy because that's the best political regime there is. And yet we only want to support it for certain types of people, the people that benefit us. We've already pillaged Africa for a lot of their minerals and their this and that, so we don't care. Right? So let's cut all the funding for them. But then when other people go in there, when China starts to go into Africa, in 25 years, well, we can't have China all of a sudden building African bridges and building African infrastructure. The same thing with our own region. How much of a role has the United States of America played in building, for example, Jamaica? But as soon as the Chinese go in there, it's a problem. They only want what they can't have. And they don't think like long-term and strategically about, okay, well, if we don't help these other nations, there's different ways of spreading democracy. You do it like what he just did with Maduro. That's one way of doing it, but we've seen how many times that has failed. The other way is to try to create stronger countries. As the last video said, building proper infrastructure, helping people to become self-reliant and resilient and economically viable countries. And you don't do that by pulling much needed funding from these countries. Because there will be a geopolitical set of implications for what is happening, and it's going to further destabilize all of Africa. But you guys don't care about that. How many of you are outraged by this? Huh? How many of you are outraged by this? The shock of this means that countries who were trying to be more self-reliant, they were looking at industrialization, domestic resource mobilization, going through this transition, all of that has now has been impacted negatively. And that was done, folks, under the Trump administration. So for a man that you say, well, you know, he's trying his best to push democracy onto the rest of the world, and you're agreeing with, okay, he's doing it by force in Venezuela, but then you're not looking at what's happening in Africa and how he's unfunding, and even in his own country, how he's defunding all of these really useful programs that helped people who are marginalized financially. Not everybody's a billionaire like Trump, right? And by the way, his money and his financial success has more than tripled or quadrupled in this last term alone. And that's just been in the last year. He's looking out for big business. He's looking out for him, his millionaire and billionaire friends. His family members are now getting contracts that previously they have never had access to. They didn't have those connections. The Trump name did not mean that much on the global scale. Most of you talk about how much Trump owned and what his business acumen has been. Most of the things that Trump's name was on, it was just a name only. They had an agreement with him. We'd put your name on this building. He didn't own the building, nothing. He got a couple of dollars for his name being on there. I need y'all to fact check yourselves and to wake up. Because like I always said, you are entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your facts. Okay? Somebody said, if I'm a Muslim, do I look like a Muslim? Come again. Al says the selective outrage is sickening. Damon says he wanted China to build a cruise ship terminal. Like I said, if the Americans don't do it, the Chinese, which not for nothing, need I remind you of the financial relationship between China and the United States of America? I told you guys about this article. I think it was in The Economist. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can find it again. Where the U.S. position and a lot of the, hold on. One second. Let me just take a quick break and grab this call.
Recover Personal Injury Attorneys, helping injured people get what they deserve. Did you know that insurance companies have lawyers that represent their interests? Before signing and accepting any settlement, know your rights. Call us today for a free consultation at 924-9999. That's 924-9999. Recover. Your personal injury attorneys are on standby to assist.
Oh, my apologies. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Forgot to unmute myself. So I was saying that China and the United States of America are deeply financially intertwined through trade, investment, and government debt, right? Even as they frame that they're strategic rivals. Let's talk first about the trade and how the money flows. There's a two-way trade of goods and services amounting to $659 billion in 2024, with the U.S. running a large trade deficit. So in other words, they import far more from China than it exports. Everything from your phones, chips, in your computers. The list is so long that it's right? China earned an estimated $360+ billion of its 2024 trade surplus from trade with the U.S., reflecting again on how important the U.S. consumer demand is for Chinese manufacturing. One of the big things y'all need to know, though, is when it comes to China and the U.S. government debt, China is a major foreign holder of U.S. Treasury securities. It holds about $689 billion as of October 2025. This is nothing new. The peak at one point was 1.3 trillion at the peak in 2013. Those treasury purchases effectively lend money to Washington. It helps to finance U.S. deficits. Yeah? And understand what I'm telling you. The U.S. government financially is relying on China. And yet they want to talk about they're trying to stop the spread of Chinese imperialism or whatever they're claiming, communism or whatever they're claiming that the U.S. is doing. Then stop borrowing money from China. Who else are you going to borrow it from? Come on, folks. Bring the facts to the table. Let's talk about cross-border investment and finance. U.S. goods and services trade with China includes a growing financial services component. Pay attention, K-Man. In 2024, U.S. financial services exports to China were about $4.2 billion. There was a surplus in that sector. U.S. firms have tens of billions of dollars invested in China's financial sector, around $17 billion on the mainland, plus $13 billion via Hong Kong. Add it together. Chinese direct investment in U.S. financial services is much smaller at $4 billion. Let's talk about capital markets and regulatory tension. Stocks and bonds. The 2020 phase one deal, which opened up more of China's markets to the U.S. investors. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So the U.S. depends highly on China as a key supplier of manufacturing goods and an important buyer of treasuries. China depends on the U.S. demand for dollar, yes, and capital to support growth. So there is a mutually dependent relationship, but more so on the United States of America. Remember what we mentioned some weeks or months ago about the whole agriculture and that they were purchasing, I think, what bean was that again? And now that Donald Trump has gone in and put tariffs on that, he is soybeans. He has destroyed the soybean industry for his American people. He's not hurting China because China can source it from somewhere else. So there's a lot of money through agriculture that is flowing between China and the U.S. because China is a major buyer of American farm products, particularly soybeans, as I said before. Right? Because of the trade wars, this has now become volatile, and China is finding other places that they can source it from. But China was the top buyer for U.S. agriculture, buying tens of billions of dollars in product every single year. In 2024, China imported about $27 $6.5 billion in U.S. agriculture goods, down from a record $36.4 billion in 2022. They were buying soybeans, they were buying corn, sorghum, cotton, pork, beef, poultry, alfalfa. Talk to me, Denny.
So if you had to make a choice and it was up to you, you had unilateral authority, would you prefer China or America to be the dominant world power?
I don't necessarily have a preference. I mean, I'm saying...
No. Somebody has to be dominant because that's just the way the world works. Would you prefer China or the U.S.?
The rate that the U.S. is going right now? I don't know.
Okay, so you are leaning towards China then.
I don't have a preference. I think that you're saying that if I had no choice, but I'm saying is what we have been taught and conditioned to believe about democracy in the great United States of America, we need a reality check. It's not cut out to be what it is.
Well, they did destroy the Constitution. That's for sure. But that was predicted by the founding fathers that it would take approximately 200 years to do it. And they did it. It is destroyed. Okay? There are plenty of things in the world that isn't going the way it's supposed to go, including in the UK. Okay? How does a law-abiding citizen running a business as a consultant leave the UK, go to the United Kingdom, go to the range, shot firearms lawfully, took a picture, put it on his LinkedIn page, and when he got back to the UK, he was arrested. The reason he was arrested was because he posted a picture that might offend someone. And we call that freedom. There's lots of problems in the world. But if you think communism is the solution, you're delusional. I have plenty of criticisms about the UK, about the US, and other places not doing the things. I get it. It's not going the way it ought to go. In fact, the argument is made that you see the reason why Trump was elected to begin with was the consequence of a country not listening to the needs of its people. And people were lashing out against those who were in power to do something different because it wasn't working for them. New York voted for a socialist Democrat, Mamdani. Again, that is characterized as being similar to people lashing out saying, look, there's something about what's happening isn't working for us. We just can't make it. So I'm not suggesting to you that I think America is the perfect example of how things should go. But if you think communism is the answer, you're sadly mistaken. The answer is to get back to the principles you say you agree is best, meaning the rights that are articulated in the West. What has happened is that the people who are controlling it are deceitfully wielding the power that the West has offered us in this degree of freedom for their own benefit. That's largely true in many of the countries, including Europe. They ignore the average person. But you have to...
Well, my point is this, Denny. When you do things, not even just ignoring the average person in your country, when you do things on the international front that makes people question your commitment to your so-called democracy, what do you think will happen? Well, you don't think that makes the place ripe and ready for other people like China, like Russia to go in? Yes, you can't just say that you want to be a democracy and democracy is the best way to run the world, and you don't practice true democratic principles and action.
I just got through explaining to you that I have lots of problems with what's happening generally in the West. They're ignoring our rights.
Yeah, but you can't continue to say that that's going to happen, and that's what they're doing, and there'll be no consequences from that. Geopolitical consequences will flow.
I'm saying to you that there are people who say, "Oh, but listen to this." People who look at Cayman. Cayman has a king, but yet Cayman say we don't want a king in the U.S., but we don't want a dictator deposed in Venezuela. There's something seriously wrong with our thinking. Now, if you think that building a port in the Cayman Islands by China is somehow going to help us, you're sadly mistaken. Because you listen very carefully to what the U.S. is saying. Whether you and I agree with it or not, they do not want their adversaries with a base right next door to them. We would just be collateral damage in that dispute.
Yeah, but yet they do it themselves. How much of their infrastructure is being built by Chinese money?
Okay. You're focused on America needing China. China needs America just as much as America needs China.
I wouldn't say just as much, but it is a reciprocal relationship.
No, they need them just as much. And the reason for that is America wants the goods that are manufactured in China, and China wants the revenue that America spends in China for those goods. If you took away the spending of the American economy on goods and some services in China, China would be in a lot of financial problems. No, I'm not saying that to say. I'm not saying that to say that it's all on China. I'm saying they both need each other because they have decided for a long period of time to go down this road of globalism, which means free trade.
Okay.
Okay.
So when you talk about the port example, right? And then I say to you that Chinese shipping and port companies hold minority stakes already in a handful of U.S. port terminals. It's this philosophy of what's good for me isn't good for you.
No, what it is the difference between
40% stake in a terminal joint venture at the Port of Los Angeles.
Yes.
And direct equity exposure at the Port of Houston.
Yes.
But don't build a cruise port in the Cayman Islands by the Chinese. Because once again, what's good for them, they play by a different set of rules because this is how democracies work. What's good for them shouldn't apply to anybody else because they would see that as an affront if we did that. If we allowed the Chinese to have a 40% stake in a port here in the Cayman Islands, that's a problem. But the United States of America can do it. You see, this is the rhetoric that the outside world looking in to the Americans is sick and tired of.
Okay,
the drug problem that they have.
You're not looking at this in its proper context. California has state rights. Okay? And there's a difference between federal jurisdiction and state jurisdiction. And the difference between how China operates and how the US operates is that the policies can change from one administration to the next depending on who's in charge. So some administrations are okay with having more Chinese involvement in their economy, and some administrations are not. In China, they don't have the burden of those wide policy shifts like you do in America because, well, they have a philosophy that is enduring for a very long period of time. So what I'm saying to you is that just because you have a particular president in power doesn't mean that he can just up and say, oh, no, you can't do business with so-and-so. He can't. But whether you like it or not, if the America doesn't like the fact that Cayman would have China having a platform just next door to them, it's going to become our problem. I'm not saying to you that it's right. I'm just saying to you what I think will happen. And they're making that abundantly clear. Rubio he's saying it explicitly. None of their adversaries is going to have a platform next door to them. They're saying it. What do you say about people who say things? You say believe them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not happy about what's happening in the West by any stretch of the imagination. But that's not a justification to adopt communism because you don't like a certain individual who's in power in America. We have to think about the issues, not the personality.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. What a mess we're in. That's one thing I can tell you is for certain. I don't know how else to put it, but it is 10:30. We've gone into overtime and I have stuff to do. So I've got to get to it, but we will continue these conversations. Like I said, I'm trying to get some Venezuelans on the show so they can talk about their experiences in Venezuela, because none of us are Venezuelan. Obviously, we don't live in the country. So a lot of our thoughts and what we have to say are speculative to a certain extent. So we'd love to have the Venezuelans on the program. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sandy. How are you?
Not bad. How are you?
Interesting year so far, I see.
Yeah, for sure. Never a dull moment.
Well, of course, indeed. Well, of course, as maybe you and some of you may know, of course, naturally, these kind of things I'm watching extra closely, me. I, of course, have to be very, very careful in what I say here, but I'll just make this briefing short. The stuff that's going on in the US and all the things globally that we see going on now in the world, I recommend that one carefully looks at a special project that the Russians have been doing for decades now. They call it active measures. And there was a former KGB guy who whistleblowed the idea of active measures and tried to warn the West and the Americans about this. Of course, as we could see, falling on deaf ears. But definitely look into active measures. And the gentleman in question was Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. And I think if some actually sits down and listens very carefully how he describes how active measures is done, you'd be quite surprised. And I think right now, Russia, Vladimir Putin, being a former KGB agent, would be absolutely laughing and caring how well it is actually working. That's what I'll say about that. And yes, interesting stuff going on. I don't expect things to be calming down anytime soon. Very interesting year to come ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the call. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap up the conversation there, and we will be back tomorrow morning. Like I said, I'm working feverishly to get some Venezuelans on the program who can give us their take on a lot of these things. And so we'll continue to have the discourse. There's a lot happening in the world, and we have got to pay attention to it, folks. All right, until tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is what, Thursday already? Yes, I think it's Thursday. Today's Wednesday. Please have a wonderful and productive day, and we'll see you back here at 7:30 a.m. Cayman's #1 talk show gets you covered on all of your local, regional, and international discussions. See you tomorrow, folks.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Cold Hard Truth on Bobo 89.1 FM. Cayman's #1 talk show is live weekdays from 7:30 a.m. Never miss an episode again. Watch anytime on CMR's Facebook and YouTube channels for the latest show episodes. Don't forget to follow us online on our social media channels and visit CaymanMarlRoad.com for all the latest news and community happenings.